on this, and this is Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program, interviewing Frank M. Hitlaw at Wabash, Indiana, on 24th of October, 1985, and the interview is being conducted at the Wabash Carnegie Public Library. Frank, I think you and I are just going to talk here, and the first question I'm going to ask you is, tell me a little bit about yourself prior to the time going to service, and I mean where you were born, who your parents were, and grandparents, and where you went to school and all that stuff, and then we'll lead right up into going into service.
Okay, I was born in Trenton, Michigan, August 29th, 1947. My parents were Frank Hitlaw and Joyce Hitlaw. Her maiden name was Bartell. They were both from my dad was from the West Virginia, Ohio area, around the Wheeling, West Virginia, Steubenville, Ohio, in that area. His mother was Tekla Hitlaw, Hytla, and it was a combination German-Polish name, and they Americanized it, and my dad was the first Hitlaw. I guess that was common practice back at the 20s, after the World War I, when the people come over so their names would sound more American. And I moved to Wabash, and I lived first part of my life in Wyandotte, Michigan. It's a suburb of Detroit, downriver area. And in 1956, I moved to Indiana and to Wabash in 57. Lived over by Bunker Hill for a while, and then moved to Wabash, and have basically called Wabash home since then. I went to the Wabash High School, class of 65. I quit in 64. I have a diploma that says 64 from Wabash High School, and that was more luck than skill getting that. It was I took a GED test, and when I went into just after I was in the service, I took my GED and passed it, and passed the GED before I would have graduated normally from high school. They sent a paper here from the Armed Forces Institute to Wabash High School. Wabash High School sent me a general diploma, and dated it April of 64, the last day I went to school. So in some ways, like I said, I was more luck than skill. Yeah. But I saved myself a year of school.
How did you happen to go into service, and why did you pick the particular branch that you did, and what happened? And then go into your service career.
Well, I didn't have a job, and there was a lot of dropouts about that time, and the war hadn't started. It was strictly something you read about a little bit on the news, that there were some American advisors over there at the time, and we're talking early 64. So I went down and corralled a recruiter. I had been skydiving prior to this. I made my first jump when I was 16. I was a junior. And in 63, October of 63, I made my first jump. And out at Wabash Airport. So I had these great desires to become a paratrooper. So the Army had the paratroopers, and I naturally went and volunteered for airborne and infantry, and I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and Fort Knox I took my basic, got out of basic in December 64, went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for my advanced training. And when I finished that up, I went to jump school at Fort Benning. And I was at Fort Benning, and we get this briefing on where we want to go after jump school. And there was this biggest, meanest looking fella I ever seen in my life wearing this funny looking green hat, said he was looking for volunteers. I had already volunteered a couple times, and I had good test scores, good test scores, and a decent service record. They asked me if I'd like to go into the Special Forces. Had no idea what I was in for. So from there I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and subsequently to Camp Mackall.
Let's go back a little bit. You're the first one that I've interviewed that's gone through jump school. Why don't you go through the basic procedure, the physical conditioning, the mental conditioning, the mock-up towers, and everything goes with it, and your first jump and all that?
Well, the first jump in jump school was kind of crazy because it was a lot of people's first jump. It was about my 50th. I had skydiving experience, but so a lot of the things I did know, but it sure was. They have a way. I remember it was 3 weeks, and I thought that was the roughest 3 weeks that anybody could ever put on anybody. I subsequently found out they have other things that's even worse.
The jump school is only 3 weeks long?
Yes.
Okay.
And the first week is called Ground Week. Hardcore PT. Hard PT. They get you up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Whistle blows. They have a rule in jump school that if you're outside of a building, you've got 1 step to be at a double time. Now, I don't care where you're going. If you're going to church, you've got 1 step outside of a door and 1 step to stop before you go in a door. Everything else is done in a double time. You're either double timing or standing at attention in formation. It's one of the two. So at 5 o'clock in the morning, they blow the whistle. You jump out of bed and get dressed. And at 5:45, by the time you dressed, showered, shaved, got your bed made, you run down and count off on they have cables strung, and you stand on the cables. And you count off. Everybody's got what they call a chalk number, and it's a stick number. And one number I'll never forget is 314 was my helmet number in jump school, because everything's done by your number. And it's taped on the front of your helmet. So you run to breakfast, which was a big consolidated slop hall, mess hall. I mean, it was. Boy, they fed you like cattle. They'd run in 50 at a time. And it'd probably seat 2,000. Built in 1941. It was an old, wooden, nasty place. And they'd run you in there for breakfast. And then you ran back, right after, as soon as you left the mess hall, you ran all the way back to the company area, which is about a mile each way.
In formation?
No, you run back. Well, you run over in formation. You run back loose. And then you had a few minutes after chow to kind of let everybody get back, and you kind of sit in the barracks. And at 7 o'clock, they would blow another whistle, and you would be back down on the cables in the company area, count off again, then you would double time to the training area. The training area is about 2.5 miles away. Now you run all over creation so far down there, and you still haven't got to the training area. Mm-hmm. Then you get to the training area, you have an inspection, personal inspection, belt buckles shined and boots polished and hair cut and shave and press fatigues. And when you got done with that, you had an hour of PT, followed by a 3 or 4 mile run. Then everywhere you went in the training area, every training classes were 50 minutes with a 10-minute break. So when the 50-minute block of instruction was up, you had to sit at attention. You had to pay attention because they had little mind games we played. One was called Hit It. And you got into the proper body position. You counted 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. And you had to hold that body position. They might say, and the only way you can leave that is for somebody to say, check canopy, which is the next step. And if they say check canopy, then you can get out of that. Then they'll say recover. somebody might say check cantaloupe, and then you're down doing push-ups. Or they'll say recover, and you'll recover, and it's almost like a game of Simon Says. And it's, hit it, do 10, and, you scream airborne, get up and run away. And I counted one day I did over 600 push-ups just for little things like that. And it was a bad day at Black Rock. Yeah. But everybody did that. It was just one of the things. I nailed everybody. And so you had to pay attention in the classes. First week you jumped out of the 34-foot tower and went down a cable, and you went down to a mound of dirt about 100 yards away. It was kind of a neat ride. And other things that they had was called suspended agony, where you spend an hour hanging in a harness, learn how to slip a parachute, steer it, basically. The swing landing trainer, you basically learn how to parachute landing falls and this type of thing. Then the second week, then at noon, you double time back. Went through the whole rigmarole for lunch, and then you double time back to the training area. And then you had 3 or 4 more classes, and at 4 o'clock in the evening you was done. The classes, like I said, you got 10-minute break every hour, but you had to double time to the break area. And the training area was quite large, so you might have to double time a half a mile just on a break. It was interesting that week. That was probably the roughest week.
The second week?
The first week.
Oh, the first week.
Second week, you went over what's called Tower Week. And a lot of people have seen the pictures of the big 250-foot towers where they haul you up. Well, they don't haul you up 250 feet. They haul you up 246 feet and stop. Then they haul you up the last 4 feet and drop you. And they might stop you up there on a tower. It's basically the same as the first week with the tower added in. You got a couple added attractions called the wind machine. It's a airplane engine with a propeller on a trailer, and they lay you on the ground, and usually in a gravel parking lot, and they'll fire this thing up and they'll let the parachute drag you. And I always wanted a Band-Aid concession for that, where the skinned elbows and knees, and because you think that 35-foot parachute makes a heck of a spinnaker. They really drag you. And so that was added to the second week and the tower, but basically it was the same as the first week. It's more repetition of going through some things. Then the third week was jump week. You made 5 jumps out of 130. It was interesting. My second jump, we had an in-flight emergency. They shut down an engine on it, but it was no big thing because the airplane could fly on 2. It was a 4-engine C-130. And I was second man at the door, and I looked out and I seen the propeller stop. I said, well, this is kind of interesting. And they pulled us back from the door and set us back down. What happened was they have little, they call them fire eyes in the engine compartment. One of them set off, and they thought they might have had a fire or something, and they shut the engine down. And they flew us back, and they crawled up around the wing and tinkered with it a little bit and said, it's a malfunction with the light, and we're not going to worry about it. And went back out and jumped.
Did many wash out of jump school, or everybody had about 12, 13 weeks of basic before this? Right.
There's a lot of people that weren't motivated. The washouts, people couldn't bring themselves to jumping off the 34-foot tower. We probably lost as many there. Other people brought themselves out in the crowd. The best way to get through jump school is fade into the scenery and just be a part of the crowd. Don't let them pick you out of anything, because they do. You've got problems. You've got problems. I remember my last day of Tower Week, and it couldn't have been a better day. It was my last day of Tower Week. They found a hair growing someplace I missed shaving, a little patch of something, and it was, "Hey, Wolfman, and I had to run back to the barracks and shave, and a guy followed me in a Jeep, and I had to run back to the training area and report, and from then on it was, hey, Wolfman, all day. That was the day I did 600 push-ups.
Yeah.
It just seemed like every time I turned around, somebody yelling, hey, Wolfman, drop, and do 10 push-ups and get up and scream airborne. Hope you can get away and fade in the scenery. Luckily, it was the last day of Tower Week, and then we moved on to Jump Week. But it was a lot of mind games they played. They wanted you so mad that you was going to jump out of that airplane to spite them. I mean, you was so ticked that you was more afraid of having to live down the things that they might say about you than you was of getting killed, falling from the sky.
There was no war. There were no wars going on at this time, and basically nothing had started.
That's right.
And yet that they were going all out in this training. Any women in these classes?
No, not at this time. This was back when men were men.
Yeah. Of course, as you can see now, I don't know what the facilities are now, but obviously they couldn't put women in this group.
Well, they do have women going through the airborne school, but it's a whole different school. The physical requirements are different and everything else.
Certainly, there's no women that could stand this training.
Well,
maybe there are. I don't know.
Well,
It'd be unusual.
They so laxed off on the physical requirements that they didn't have.
Yes.
I was in probably the best shape of my life when I got out of 3 weeks of jump school. I went from 115 pounds when I went into service. By the end of jump school, I was up to 180 pounds and still wore the same size pants.
Yeah. Now, was the food and everything was adequate?
Very good, and there's plenty of it. And I mean, you really put it on.
Yeah.
If you had to take it off, they took it off you. If you need some beef put on you, they put beef on you.
Yeah. And no free time, basically, in the 3 weeks?
Very little. You didn't want to go out because you went out, you had to be running.
Mm-hmm.
So the only place I went was to the snack bar, and I'd grab a banana split every night. Just packing away the calories because you burned them up all day.
Yeah. Okay, what time of year is this now?
This is February 65.
February 65. And you've been in the Army since what date?
October 16th.
Of 64.
Yeah.
Okay, then jump school, you get your wings, and then what happens?
I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
This man came and...
Well, this guy, he came to the thing, and they had a briefing for everybody.
At the end of your training?
Well, it was during the training. You had usually, they figured a spare day in there in jump week in case of bad weather, so they could still get you out on time. Mm-hmm. So they figured one extra day, and that would give you one jump the first day, then this one jump the second day, two the third, and one more. And because you had a day jump and night jump in the third day, and they had an extra day in there. So if you had good weather, we spent the morning out policing a drop zone, and in the afternoon we spent in this briefing. And they picked the people that had the highest test scores, and they give us personal interviews and talk to us, and give us this great and glorious story about the Special Forces. And I think everybody wants to picture themselves as a hero, and I said, my word, this guy was 9 feet across his shoulders, and you just had the idea that when you got done with this school, you was going to be swinging from a vine with a knife in your teeth, and going out, and there's nothing you couldn't do. Well, I got a rude awakening. I found out that wasn't the case at all. The Special Forces mission is not to fight a war. Contrary to popular belief, the mission of the Special Forces is not to go out and fight because you don't have a big enough group to raise too much of a fight. Mm-hmm. Some things you did combat operations, but your mission is to be a teacher. Your mission is to instruct partisan forces. And a Special Forces A team, 12-man team, can instruct a battalion and operate them and advise them and equip them. So it's a pretty unique situation. You really wasn't it was more brain power than it was brawn.
So this is the group that you joined in?
Right.
Okay. And how many of your class were allowed to join?
Well, there was only 5 of us went.
Okay. And where did they take you for training then?
Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
And I will describe that training.
That training was, I thought airborne school was about as tough as it could get. Well, they, at the Special Forces training group, were about as mean as anybody you ever met in your life. Those people were just vicious. They did not want you to become a Special Forces troop. They just didn't want you. And they told you they didn't want you. And the only way you can get to be one is to actually just literally overpower them. And I don't mean physically. I mean you have to overwhelm them. And each one of them stand there, can turn thumbs down, you're gone. You really have to do a tough job. It was a tough school. I mean, they had little things like a map and compass course. They would not tell you. You might have to. They give you a map and a set of coordinates and a compass. Now, everything done at Special Forces School is done with a 40-pound rucksack. They weigh it every morning. You hang it on a fish scale. So when you run one of these compass courses, you're carrying a 40-pound ruck. Now, you might run a course that might be 7 miles. They do not tell you. Okay, I'm going to say, let me back up a little bit. Generally in military training, they will say, okay, you're here, we want you here, you have so long to hit your objective. They wouldn't tell us what the cutoff was. Because the object was to run you as hard as you could run. If it's, say, a 7-mile course and I had 4 hours to do it, well, I get 5 miles into this course in an hour and a half, I can say, well, I got time to sit down and take a break. And still hit my time. Well, they don't tell you what the cutoff is, or what the time, if you're late, you fail.
Yeah.
So there's only one way to do it, and that's just run and run and run and run, and when you get there, they say, good, you did real well, son. And you say, afterwards you find out what the cutoff times were. Mm-hmm. Just to find out, to motivate you and find out how long, you'll go. Yeah. And it was tough, that kind of stuff. We went to, they put us on an island. It was the proverbial desert island, mm-hmm. And they put us out there 3 at a time. No food, minimum water, no cigarettes, and I smoked at the time. No nothing, and just sit you out there for about 4 days, just to let you sit. And
did you have your pack, or did you have a sleeping poncho?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Just nothing. A canteen and a cup of water and a first aid kit, and that was it. And I mean, this was offshore, off of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And they just take you out there in a helicopter. This thing is it's like a sandbar. There's nothing on it. You just sit out there. And they figured that was a good little mind game to play. Mm-hmm. See if you cracked up out there, or do something stupid for one of a cigarette or water or food. They kept an eye on you, but you never knew that. That was the little game we played. We went down and played in the swamp down at Eglin Air Force Base, and jungle training and mountaineer training. And my specialty was I went to the Advanced Airborne School, the Halo Freefall School. And That's where you send an assault team in of maybe 6 people. You're capable of free falling in with the steerable sport type parachutes. And you might leave a B-52 bomber at 40,000 feet. And from 40,000 feet, if you turn downwind, you could track by changing your body position, much like the position a ski jumper takes up, and you could go about 6 miles horizontally, plus down, of course. And you'd open a parachute. Another myth about Halo, you don't open a parachute down about 500 feet. You open a parachute about 5,000 feet. The reason is you can hear the parachute open. And you can hear the people falling. And at 5,000 feet, you're far enough away from the ground they can't hear you.
Yeah.
That's about when they start picking you up. And at night, the idea would be a person would see, say, a radar operator. You want to take out a radar site on a raid. Yeah, you might see this plane go over constantly and say, well, that's the one that goes over at 10 o'clock every night. And 30 minutes later, his sight blows up. Because he cannot pick you up on radar. Then you have to exfiltrate out any way you can. It's every man for himself. You know, what amounts to, you walk out.
Well, where did you take this training then?
At Fort Bragg.
At Fort Bragg.
Yeah, it was part of Fort Bragg.
Yeah. And how many are going on to this type?
Well, usually they have a few out of every training class. Some people went to scuba to learn how to do the things underwater. And I was always interested in the free fall parachuting, so I took to the parachuting. And you make about 15 jumps, and you have to make some high altitude jumps. It was interesting. It was really interesting.
Go ahead then with your training and what happens in your
Well,
career.
once you get through basic, or they call it the Q course, Special Forces Qualification course, which is everybody gets. Then the brain work really starts. You're trained in one of 5 specialties: light weapons, heavy weapons, demolitions, medical, and signal. You're trained in as a specialist. The other, another one you're cross-trained in, and you get a rudimentary knowledge of, or more than working knowledge of. So everybody you can lose part of the team, and you still got a considerable force, left. And you not only do you have to learn how to do these things, but you also have to learn how to teach them. And you not only have to learn how to teach them in English, you have to learn how to teach them in a foreign language through an interpreter. And that's not an easy thing to do. So the first 6 weeks of Special Forces is just work. I mean, it is just, they run you ragged. They try every way in the world to wash you out. And then it starts more of a mind game, brain work, methods of instruction. I went through light weapons, and I had to learn how to take apart every Soviet weapon that was ever built. Every 20th century weapon we studied. I mean, if it was made in Turkey, we studied it. From everything from the old Lee Enfield that the British had at the Khyber Pass, clear up to the most modern infantry weapons, sporting weapons, handguns. We had to have we had to go out on the range daily, and you'd fire a familiarization with each weapon. You're talking machine guns, and a lot of captured weapons and NATO weapons, and some things so bizarre. Plus, you learn how to make your own weapons. And that was all. That was probably the most interesting portion of the instruction of how to make your own weapons. And I backed that up with a my secondary was in demolitions and engineering, and that was really interesting. It was very interesting to learn some of the things that you can do to things.
Yeah.
And you got a lot of physical work of physical training, because you can't be too sloppy. You have to be in good shape, because the mission was to go behind the lines. They couldn't have somebody back there sickly. Your medics is very unique, because they were fully capable of, one, pulling teeth, taking your appendix out, pulling your teeth, or like I said, most emergency surgeries, because they might not be able to get you to a doctor. It was very complex and very interesting. Then once you went to an operational unit, as a lower rated enlisted man, I didn't make it to an A team, because A team was E5 and above. There was a few E4s and Spec 4s on A teams, but very, very few. You went into a B or a C detachment, and I went into I was in Company D as 5th Special Forces, and a C detachment. And then I went to, I got orders for Vietnam after I graduated and was declared fully operational.
Yeah. Now what's the other name of the Special Forces?
Green Berets.
Green Berets. And that was popularized by?
Barry Sadler.
Uh-huh.
And long later in the story, I'll tell you about Barry. I was with him at Play to Limb. It's kind of a strange little story.
Wasn't the real beginning was Kennedy's?
Actually, it was before that. It was actually beginning with the OSS in World War II. Then they went on up, and when the big thing for Kennedy, the big show for Kennedy at Fort Bragg, they had to go get people from the Ranger School. They had to get people from the 82nd, 101st Airborne, and there was like 1,500 of them for that thing, and there wasn't 1,500 Special Forces troops
At that time.
Yeah, it was a big whitewash, big show, but it was good.
When you get out, then how many are in the Special Forces?
Oh, there was about I would say about 5,500.
5,500.
Yeah.
Did it balloon up or?
Yeah, it ballooned up and then it dropped way down. And this is not counting. I'm just talking about what they call full flash people.
Yeah.
Your beret, each unit or group had a different colored flash, the little cloth patch behind the insignia, the oppresso libri, which is Latin for deliberate to oppress. The unit insignia, and training people just wore the metal crest on the beret. Once you graduated, then you was and assigned a group, then you could put your flash behind it, and they call it full flash beret.
Now, did many wash out of this training?
About 80%
washed out.
Yes, it was very, very tough training.
So you make it. You're one of 5,500 in the Special Forces.
Mm-hmm.
Your rank now is?
I was an E3.
Okay. And then you're assigned to Vietnam. What year? What are we looking at?
No, I was assigned to a unit at Fort Bragg.
Okay.
I spent the end of the summer in August. I was at West Point. I went up there as an instructor to teach jungle survival to West Point cadets. And then at the end of September, I got my orders for Vietnam.
Had you had enough experience to teach them something, you think, at that time? Or?
I taught them, I taught a course in reptiles because I told somebody I was afraid of snakes.
Yeah.
And I got the snake pit. And we had several snakes, and I had a 2-hour block of instruction on basically how to catch a snake and skin it and cook it.
Yeah.
It was very weird.
Then your career takes what turn?
Vietnam.
Okay. How are you attached to a company, or they detach you, or what? How do they operate?
Well,
to get you to Vietnam.
I got special forces were very. It was a priority. I mean, because they spent all this time and money training you. The training was so tough, and it's so hard to get one guy. I mean, it was tough. Basically, if you listen to Barry Sadler's song, 100 men tried and only 10 made it. Well, so you're talking about basically 15 out of every 100 making it. There's a lot of money wrapped up in you. When I got to Vietnam, I checked in at Camp Alpha. I flew commercial to Japan, and then flew military into Saigon.
Okay, but you're just detached from your group and sent, correct? As a
Right,
as a replacement.
as a replacement over to Vietnam,
Okay.
as to headquarters, 5th Special Forces.
Okay, but do you fly just commercial? You get out and get on
Right,
what
I flew.
airline? Or,
Right, I got Northwest Orient. I flew.
Yeah, and no military on the plane besides yourself?
Well, there was five military people in the group. I was a group leader.
You were the group leader. And they were all special forces?
No,
Yeah. Okay.
no, they were just. That's just how we went. Just the luck of the draw.
Yeah, and fly to Japan, then on down to what place did you land in Vietnam?
Saigon, Ton Snoot. And
First
one-
impression?
hot,
And
smelly,
like what?
like a dump. I don't know. It just hot, and something eerie about the place. It just when they put you on a bus with mesh over the windows so somebody couldn't throw a grenade in. You say, I think this is the real place.
Was
So-
any of the air base under attack or anything?
No, there was no attacks going on or nothing of any consequence. Matter of fact, we went over to Camp Alpha, got a little bit of an in-country briefing there. After we got in, settled down, picked up a mattress and stuff, and they told us they said they haven't ever been mortared at Camp Alpha, and they said at this time, but we have a foolproof method of alerting you. It's when you see a big boom, hear a boom, and you look up and see a cloud of dust in the camp. And he says, this NCO told us, says, just roll off on the floor. The hooch's barracks are sandbagged up about 4 feet. Pull your mattress down on top of you. If you get hurt, don't lay there and scream. We'll come and get you. But and we'll check everybody out. So, but there wasn't any fighting going on. At night, you could see tracer fire way off in the distance, and see a few flares way off in the distance. I'm talking, 20 miles away. You could see puffs working. You could hear bombing strikes. It just sound like thunder off in the distance. It really wasn't that bad a place as compared to what I had heard about it. I was, matter of fact, at Camp Alpha, I was kind of impressed. There's nobody running around carrying any guns or anything like this. Well, I get handed a set of orders at Camp Alpha, and it said I'm to go to the 1st Cavalry Division as a plain old grunt. I said, "Whoa!" On this, I said, "Hey, I'm an 11 S,
Which is?
11 Special Forces."
Okay. That's your MOS then?
Right, Light Weapons Special Forces.
Okay.
And where most light weapons people or grunts were 11 Bs or 11 Bravos. I was 11 S. And they said, well, we have to fill up the first cab. And I says, but not with me. So they sent me up the first cab up to Ankh. That was my first dealing with real terror in Vietnam. The flight to Ankh. They put about 4 billion of us and stuffed us in this C-123. We took off from Ton Sa and we're about 10 minutes out and looking down at the scenery, and there's nothing down there but jungle. And so this is pretty neat, there's nothing here. And it was our first real look at what the country kind of lay of land looked like. And the airplane lurched, and one engine was stopped. They shut her down. Well, C-123 does not fly all that well on one engine. There was a series of bells which signified that we had a problem. You hear there's a bell. You get a alarm bell. It's like a school bell, electric bell, and that signifies to get ready for a crash. 6 short rings followed by 1 ring's you have to bail out. So it's a serious enough problem they would have you jump.
Did you have parachutes?
No, they didn't have any parachutes on that thing, except for the crew.
Yeah.
And the crew chief was the only ones with guns. They had 38s. We didn't have nothing. And got on board this, was on board the plane. I got turned around, and you put your back up against the bulkhead, and there was some duffel bags, and I was up there in a crash position. And I was looking out a window that was, I wasn't directly beside me, so I was looking a little bit to the rear to see out this window. And I could see kind of where we'd been, and we're getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and I see this big palm tree go by in a village, and I said, oh my God, this is it. First time I left Ton Sa I'm going to die. And we touched down there on the emergency strip at Ton Sa We had made a circle and come back in, and I couldn't see the runway coming up, but I seen the village at the end of it going by. I said, oh boy, I hope there's a runway out in front of us, but it wasn't. It was, obviously, but so then we sit on the ground. They took us back over to Camp Alpha, and we sit there the rest of the day, and then the next morning we back over on another 123 and went up to Ankh. Now, in the meantime, I'm still protesting this. I am not going, I'm basically kicking and screaming all the way. I'm not liking this at all. Because if I'd wanted to be a regular grunt, I could have saved myself a whole lot of time and a whole lot of misery of, sitting in the Florida Everglades swatting mosquitoes. That wouldn't have happened to me. I said, I put up with this, and I'm going to be one of them. Well, I get to Ankh, and they give me an in-country orientation there. And they put me in the 7th Cavalry, which was interesting. They tell us the history of the 7th Cavalry, and they said, well, it was once commanded by a man named Custer. I said, oh boy, now I know I don't want any part of this. So I got really honked, and we had a day there that we didn't do anything. So I walked over to the place called the Golf Course, which was a runway and a helipad, big helipad. And I got a plane to Nha Trang that was coming through and making a mail run. And I just walked on and sat down. They said, well, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Nha Trang. They said, you got any orders? I said, no, I'm just going to Nha Trang. Okay, I guess.
Did you have your baggage and everything? Or?
No, I left my baggage there. Because in case I had to come back, which, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. So I went down to Nha Trang, and this is in the morning, and it was like a 30-minute flight. And I checked in with the headquarters of Special Forces, which was right on the air base at Nha Trang. I checked in with them and told them what the story was. And I said, whoa, we'll get that stopped. So they sent me over to personnel, their personnel, and they got me a set of orders, and they found out where the fiasco was. And they made a call over to First Cab. First Cab says, yeah, we got him.
Yeah.
He says, oh, okay. So then they sent me, they said, you go on back over there so you don't get, nailed for being AWOL. So I'm back over. Got a flight out that afternoon. And with one of the courier flights from Air America. And sit there, and then next morning they come and got me, said, where you been? We've been looking all over for you. We got a call from Natrang 5th Special Forces Headquarters. You're supposed to report there. I said, oh, okay. So back in Natrang, and I went through another in-country orientation with the Special Forces. And they asked me what I'd like to do, and they had several openings that I was qualified to do, and the most interesting was a Mike Force, which was a area quick reaction force. And basically I was a PSC getting ready to be promoted to E4. I was an E3 getting ready to be promoted to E4, and I was a platoon leader. I was an advisor to a Mike Force platoon, which was the 2 Corps. We had a Mike battalion.
What's Mike?
That was just a code name. It was it was a MF, and it was mobile force, and they just called them M Force, and instead of the phonetic code for M is Mike. So they just called us Mike Force.
Okay, but you're dealing with principally a
Vietnamese.
Vietnamese. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Quick reaction force. Anybody in the area operation AO that got in a trick bag, pinned down, needed assistance, we was a quick reaction force. We also run our own patrols. We also train these people. Typical of the Mike Force troop was Mountain Yards, which was a tribe of mountain people, much like the Aborigines. I mean, the women run around topless and the men wore loincloths. And a crossbow was a fantastic weapon for these people. And there was basically two generic tribes. The raids, R-H-A-D-E, raid, and the MEU.
How do you spell that?
M-E-O.
These were the 2 tribes of Montaguers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good fighters.
Did they coexist with each other and no problem?
Oh yeah, there's no problem with them. Vietnamese hated them.
Why?
Second-class citizens. Much like the Aborigines and the Aussies and whites and blacks here.
Yeah.
It was they were just second-class citizens. Very good fighters. We paid them 3,600 piastres a month, which is roughly $34 a month. To them, that was great because the average wage for a mountain yard was like $60 a year. And we're paying these people, our own people. A lot of them were Cambodian descent. It was, they were good fighters. They were very good fighters.
Now, did they bring their families with them?
Yeah, they bring their families with them. We had to build a village for them, and to see some of the things you have to. It's almost beyond. I'm not capable of really explaining how primitive these people really were. The U.S. aid, the hands across the ocean people, bought them a bunch of these little Ford tractors. Now these people have trouble with water buffalo. And they got these little Ford tractors with one bottom plow on them. They thought they was really, these USA people, but it was so big of a technological jump, these people couldn't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And they drive the thing, they teach them how to drive it. And one day we went to a village, and there was a Ford tractor with one bottom plow being towed around a rice paddy by a water buffalo. And through the interpreter, we asked them what was wrong with the tractor, and they said, no go, no go. And found out it ran out of gas. Nobody told them they had to put gas in them.
Uh-huh.
It was that bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, you say, well, everybody knows you got to put gas in it.
Mm-hmm.
They left them, several cans of gas, but nobody said you had to put it inside here.
Yeah.
It was that. That's how. It was nothing to see a whole village of thatched huts going down the road. They just pick them up and carry them. They take your house with them, and it was funny. It looked like a centipede. They building with little feet sticking out of them going down the road.
So you're in charge of one of these groups then?
A platoon of
platoon.
about 50 of them.
Okay, but are they wearing Army uniforms?
They're wearing uniforms that we give them.
And
We would go into the village, we'd recruit them, we would train them.
but they could bring their families with them.
They would bring their families with them, yes, for security.
Okay, and then when you'd be off on these strikes or whatever happened to the families, would they just
They would stay back at the base camp.
stay at the base camp?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would. We moved them into areas around the base camp that was secure. Now, the ones out in the A teams would move into the A camp.
Mm-hmm.
They'd just go out to the village and bring them right in with them.
Okay. Which area are you operating out of now?
I'm out of Pleiku,
Like,
which is Central Highlands area.
yeah. Are you in a fire base or?
No, I'm in a regular. I got a bed and sheets and blankets and
Yeah.
all kinds of nice stuff. I'm in a very nice place. We would. That was where I lived, and now we went out into the field.
And you would take these Monte guards that you had trained with you.
Right.
Were they adept at firing a rifle, keeping a rifle clean?
We had, yes, they were, and they were very, like I said, they were very good fighters.
Mhm.
Very true to their word. They were good at what they did. The only problem we had was when I was there, these people were not very big. I mean, you get a mountain yard that was, 5'2", 5'3", he was getting right up there. And we give them these M1 Garands that we had, the American battle rifle in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
That first off would kick like a mule, and it's big. God, the thing weighs 8.5, 9 pounds, empty, and it's almost 4 feet long. I mean, this is quite a musket for them to be handling. Big wooden, the length of the stock, or what they call the length of pull on a rifle, was way too long for them, and usually we ended up butchering them up with some hacksaws, the stocks, trying to cut them down so they could get a sight picture. It was very much like the picture of the little kid with, his picture with Dad's hunting rifle. It was just out of proportion.
Yeah.
And besides that, this thing kicks like a mule. It's a 30-06. I mean, it really makes a noise and kicks. The M16s that we was issued is the ones that they should have had because it was small, light, carried a lot of. Some of these people were carrying BARs. That thing is humongous. The old 30 caliber M1919 machine guns that was been around since World War One. That's what we give them. It just wasn't too sophisticated a weaponry, but they were pretty good. They did a pretty good job of what they had to work with. but it was kind of hilarious to see them running around with them humongous rifles. But it was I don't know. Working with these people every day. Well, one, the LLDB, Long Lac Dak Viet, which was the Vietnamese Special Forces, my counterpart, which for every one of us there was one of them, was a sergeant. His name was Roch, R-A-C-H. Call him Sergeant Rock. He was about, you're talking 1965, 66. He was about 40 years old. Man had fought the Japanese in World War II. He helped throw the French out at Dien Bien Phu. The man's fought on both sides. Yeah. Then he found out the communists weren't all they was cracked up to be, and what they was really doing to his country, and he says, hey, he said, I'm going to throw them out. Yeah. The man's been fighting all his adult life. What could you teach somebody about that? And yeah, all he wanted to do was go out and kill Viet Cong. That was his life's ambition. The more of them he killed, better he felt.
Better he liked it.
Oh yeah, that was one less he had to worry about.
Did you get called on many missions with this Montaguard company?
Several. Usually we would go out and one of our permanent jobs, we had several permanent jobs. One was keeping the Mang Yang Pass open. The pass on Highway 19 that went from Pleiku and on to Duck Cove to the west, it went east-west through the mountains. Well, the French got their tails kicked in the Mang Yang Pass. We got ambushed there. And that was one of our permanent jobs. That was one of the things they kept us busy with. We'd go out and spend a week running patrols in the area and set up a forward operation area in there, and we'd run patrols and then set up ambushes and stuff at night. Really, it was kind of a more or less a training exercise. There were just a couple times we run into a little trouble around the pass, but mostly we didn't get bothered there, and we didn't bother anybody to speak of. Whether it was by accident or by design, I don't know. But it was just one of them things. We kept the pass open. There was a artillery unit that had 175s. We went with them and we pulled their security. And I spent about 6 months with them and my platoon of yards. Mm-hmm. And we pulled their security. Then we'd go out and run day patrols and come back in at night and set up for the night defensive.
Well, this was at a fire base then?
Right.
Name?
Well, it was at Duck Cove SF camp, a Special Forces camp at Duck Cove. Okay. And then we moved around several places. The battle at Pleiku was the first major fight I was in. Mm-hmm. Or Play-Me, excuse me. And the Play-Me SF camp was under siege. It was several firsts. It was the first time that North Vietnamese forces had been involved in the fight. October 65. Okay. Late October 65. I got moved into the camp along with my Mike unit. We had one corner of the camp we defended. And it was kind of an upgrade out. We put the panels out. They was in the wire. They would come down and get in the wire every night. And we had Sky Raiders and stuff dropping bombs. And one night they dropped napalm, and napalm's in these tanks, these aluminum tanks. And the remnants of the tank, the part of the tank, the gasoline mixture inside burned, but the wreckage from the tank stopped about 6 or 8 feet in front of my position. That's how close they was dropping this stuff to us. It was, and that was my first major fight, my first real fight. And the first time I'd ever been fired on was at Play Me.
How did that develop?
It developed for about 30 days that I never seen above ground. I felt like a worm. I got inserted into the camp with my group late just before dusk, or just before dark. It was after dusk. And we got fired on as soon as we got off the helicopters. And they fired a few mortar rounds into the place. We got down. They kind of give us a quick, told us where they wanted us. We went in, set up. There was a 105 howitzer in the corner, and I had never fired a howitzer before, and I learned how to fire that one. And you didn't even have to sight it. You just leveled the barrel so it was pointing toward this upgrade, and you used a time fuse, and you put a fuse wrench on. You just bumped it with your fist just enough to nick it, shove the thing up in there, and pull a lanyard, and the thing would go out maybe 100 yards and explode. You was guaranteed of hitting something. And that's how we fired the howitzer, from underneath.
Almost like a mortar.
It was pretty weird. It was. You didn't dare get up because you got shot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's bullets flying all the time, night and day. And they did everything except throw rocks at us. Even to the point with we got fired in on us 60 millimeter mortar rounds wired to grenade adapters that they put a rifle grenade where you put a regular fragmentation grenade on this sheet metal piece. It's got fins on it, and they can shoot it off a rifle grenade. They wired 60 millimeter mortar shells to them and shot them in at us, but they wouldn't go off because there's a setback that these 60 millimeter mortar rounds would be wired to these little metal pieces, but the setback, or there's a inertia pin that has to be fired, and it kicks a little pin out that's called a bore riding ejection pin. It's the final safety on a mortar round, and they didn't go off, but we found them in the morning, which is kind of interesting how desperate they got. The first Cav come in, and they had to fight at the Edrang Valley during this time, and took the pressure off of us. It was pretty tough fight for them. They lost a lot of men there from the 7th Cav, which was, in some ways, it was interesting to me because that was the unit that I was going to be assigned to.
That's right.
And it was there were several. It was a bloody fight. But after Play Me, I moved around with this artillery outfit.
Never wounded, did it?
Not at this time. Later on, I got dinged up a couple of times.
Did you lose any of these Montegars that you had with you? Did you lose any?
Not at Play Me, or up to this point. We had a few wounded, minor stuff, nothing to write home about. Later on, we lost several.
Who's
fights.
doing the interpreting?
Sergeant Rock, my LLDB sergeant.
Are you picking up any of the language or anything? I'm sure you have to be.
Yes. A lot of French. They understand French real well. Except when they want to be bullheaded, then they don't understand anything.
Yeah.
Which they could be. They're no different than anybody else. We had a situation. They just say, "Well, I can't understand. Don't understand." Or the thing would be no biet. So I mean, whether or not they understood. Generally, they were pretty good fighters. Generally, they were pretty good soldiers, and generally, they were tougher than a lot of people give them credit for. A lot of people, they equate the Mountain Yard Mike Force with the ARVNs, Army Republic of Vietnam, that run around playing soldier. Promotions were by who had the most money. Wasn't like that with our group. Very interesting. Very interesting tour of duty. Very interesting on a personal level, personal interaction with the Vietnamese, which give me a little different perspective than the regular American GI. The regular GI in a unit, the only Vietnamese he come across were Viet Cong trying to kill him, slicky boys trying to rip him off, or prostitutes or bar girls. That was the only contact he had with the Vietnamese. I lived with them, slept with them, ate with them every day, and depended on them for my life. And it was give me a little different perspective into the Vietnamese people, or the Montagnard people mostly. And like I said, the Vietnamese didn't like them. And at Pleiku, during this time, we had the Montagnard Uprising and the Montagnard Rebellion, which was in Pleiku province, but it was actually down toward Chio Rio. And they had a war going on between the Montagnards and the Vietnamese. I mean, when they got done fighting the Viet Cong, then it was war between each other. And one time in the A camps, we had quite a row. Who do you put inside the camp? Because you got two perimeters. Generally, the Vietnamese would be inside the camp. Montagnards around the outer perimeter. The inner perimeter, you had an inner perimeter, an outer perimeter. They're all within the security confines and the minefields and stuff like this, and punji pits of the camp. But you had the first ring, the outer ring with the Montagnards, an inner ring with the Vietnamese, and then another compound inside with the Americans. The A-team actually had the team house and the commo bunker and some other things. So
You just mentioned something. I'll make a little note there on punji pits we're going to talk about later.
So they, with the Vietnamese on the inside, they were shooting into the Montagnards. And there was a few Montagnards. Families were killed.
Yeah.
Because the families were out around there too.
They were out there too, yeah.
And, they killed a few of the families, which then caused the Montagnards to shoot back. And when they shot back, they shot into the Americans, which kind of turned their crank a little bit. And so the Montagnard War was pretty shaky for a while. It was scary. If you was with the Montagnards, the Vietnamese might turn on you.
Yeah.
If you was with the Vietnamese, the Montagnards might turn on you. So it was. They just think they had problems in the South here.
Yeah.
I mean, this was tough. I mean, it was. And at the same time, you got the Viet Cong and the NVAs. You got the 324th B Division running around up there trying to kill everybody. So it was quite a zoo for a while. But we finally got the Montagnard War straightened out and kind of got that toned down a little bit. We had to move a few of them around. Stuff, but
What did you do then?
well, we just continued to march and just worked on our mostly pulling security at this SF camp for this artillery outfit because it was a plum of a target, and running day patrols out, and toward the end of '66. Well, I don't want to get that far ahead of myself. Talking about early '65 till about June. Pulled security. Got pulled off once to go into a place called Taumarong, and we was rigged to jump into this mountainous area to pull a 502nd outfit out from 502nd, which ended up with it was a the story was very well known about Captain Carpenter, the Lonesome End, where he called a napalm strike in on top of himself. Well, before things got that desperate, they was going to send us in. The weather was cruddy. We couldn't jump in. We sit at New Pleiku Air Base, rigged for a jump, shaking in our boots, and knowing this was not going to be no pleasant experience at all. First, parachute jumps in rough terrain is bad. Parachute jumps at night into bamboo fields in mountains. I thought my chances were better without a parachute. It wasn't. It was not going to be a pleasant experience. Luckily, they canceled it, and they ended up breaking contact themselves. They got some other people in there before we could get in.
That's odd that you'd mentioned Captain Carpenter's name. I just read in the paper the other day. You probably read the same thing. He was at South Bend the other day for the Notre Dame game. He's a general, and his son plays for the Air Force.
Oh. Army.
Yeah, he was at Army, but his son's playing for Air
Oh,
Force.
his son's playing for Air Force.
Goes to the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
Well, is your first tour just about up then? You were...
No, I'm just getting into it good.
Yeah, okay.
We worked to, I went over to Tuiwa, and I got wounded in a firefight. I got some grenade fragments in my back and neck, and got splattered on the face a little bit.
But you're still with these Montaguard troops?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And spent about 30 days in the hospital in the Trang, and recovered, went back to my unit, and then went back out again, and
Give me your reactions when you were hit. What were the circumstances, and what was your own personal reaction, and what did you do immediately, and what happened? Did you medevac?
yeah, I was medevac. What happened was they started shooting rifle grenades in where we was at. We got caught in the open in a dried up rice paddy.
On patrol?
Right, and it got caught in the open, and they started shooting some rifle grenades and stuff in on us, and one of them went off pretty close to me, and I got a big dirt clod hit me in the side, and I thought it went through me. I really did. It hit me in the ribs, and it hurt, and it was a big dirt clod that got blown by the explosion, and I just ended up, I had a bruise about the size of a fist on my side, and I thought it was over. I sent blood all over me, and I said, my God, and this thing, my ribs hurt, and I didn't even know.
Did it knock you down?
I was already down. I was on the ground when I got hit, and I had kind of like a good pepper and a buckshot. I guess I must have had 8 or 10 little places. They weren't much. A couple down my leg, and then back of my neck, side of my face. One went through my lip and knocked a tooth out. I didn't even know that this had happened. This dirt clod that hit me in the side, I just knew went through, and I had a sucking chest wound, and I was going to die any minute because it pretty well knocked the wind out of me. And I just knew that this was over. And I'm trying to... I was so afraid from my chest that all these other little things I knew there was a lot of blood on me, but, from what? And it just ended up as a bunch of little minor stuff.
Uh-huh.
Well, like I said, it was I just knew I was going to die. The pain. I mean, my chest hurt. I mean, it was like somebody got me with a ball bat. I just knew that was a major damage. And somehow my mind, I had it in my mind that that's where I was hurt. And when I found out I wasn't hurt, I was so relieved that the other stuff still didn't bother me. Like I said, it was kind of a, and the pieces that hit me were so small. I mean, it was like buckshot. Well, probably the biggest one was the size of a kitchen match head. Like I said, just it wasn't anything major at this time. I spent about 25 days, I think, in the hospital over there in the train.
The big problem was infection, is what they...
Well, they was worried about it. Yeah. In that, I healed pretty quick. There was a couple of places they left open, they let drain. But I was more concerned in my chest. I just knew that thing had went clear through me, and I couldn't figure out how this blood was coming off of my neck and my side of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't where it was supposed to be. How did it splash up there or what? I didn't know. And it was I just knew that I was wounded someplace where I wasn't. And it took my mind off. I was so relieved to find I just had a few small holes in my pelt that and I figured I was going to live, that those small ones didn't bother me. Not much penetration at all. It was superficial. Matter of fact, had it not been for the medic, I probably wouldn't even done anything about most of it, until I got in, because I was due to come back in that evening anyhow. Mm-hmm. So they sent me in. Once you get to the hospital, you're not going to get out till they're ready to let you out. So I guess they have to do something to justify you being there. So I to the hospital. At the train, and spent my time there. Got out, went back to play cool, and to the Mike Force. And while they had replaced me on the Mike Force, there's a few other little jobs opened up we worked on. Part of it was a Delta project. Max SOG. Everybody thinks that SOG is Special Operations Group. Well, that wasn't. It was Studies and Operations Group, which was a cover for Special Operations Group. It was to make it sound like it was something else. It was a reconnaissance, mostly. Long-range reconnaissance. Went out a few times on a few missions with them. Had a commander, his name was Bull Simons, Arthur Simons, he was colonel. And he was one of the more colorful characters in the Army. That and a fellow named Dick Meadows. Dick Meadows was one of the few people who got a battlefield commission. Both these people later led the Song Tay raid in North Vietnam, POW.
That's where they got there, and they'd moved him 4 months ahead of time.
Right. The CIA had
tremendous intelligence we had.
Well, that was one that I know something, and I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah.
The CIA had an operation. We find out a lot of things
after the fact.
After the fact, sure. And you say, "Is that why that happened?"
Yeah.
Well, that's what that was all about. Well, they had a thing called Popeye, and Popeye was a cloud seeding. And the Song Tay camp was right in the bend of the river, and water come up, so the North Vietnamese moved POWs out. The CIA, which had some idea that they had moved the POWs out, couldn't say, because of our cloud seeding, the water come up,
yeah.
So they moved POWs out.
Yeah.
they couldn't tell anybody. So it was a strange deal.
That's
But
just like the Japanese code in World War II. We broke the code, but if we had tipped our hand, they would have changed the code.
right. But the Roadrunners was probably the weirdest operations. Sounded like a kamikaze mission, but it really worked out. It was slick as a whistle. This was one of Simon's operations. We would take what we call a White Star team or a Bright Light team. He had two types. White Star team was a light team, 6 to 8 people. 4 Americans, 4 Vietnamese, or 3 Vietnamese, 3 Americans. Always an even number. And they were basically dressed in the uniforms of the enemy. The enemy had, instead of having a password, they had, it's kind of like the hat of the day club. They might be wearing pith helmets. They may be wearing a jungle flop hat. They may be wearing the conical hats that you see, the coolie hats. They may be wearing a pith helmet with a red star. They may be wearing a lighter pith helmet. Could be almost anything. Could be black Aussie style hats rolled up. It was they changed hats is what they did. Was their code. That's how they knew who was who. And so we would put a Vietnamese forward, Vietnamese the rear, and usually work one on a flank. Americans stay in the middle. So if they run onto a patrol, an enemy patrol, talk your way out of it. Americans take cover. Okay, we go out, we set up by an enemy base camp. Park our Roadrunner, move around, act as a blocking force and security for him. He'd go buzzing down the trail on foot as a messenger. And the ground guides, the enemy ground guides, would take him in to the headquarters. And when he got to the headquarters, he would start throwing grenades and run like hell. They all looked alike. It's all dressed alike. Who did it? Was it mortars? What happened? You know, there's just suddenly a bunch of explosions, and they took out a lot of the political cadre, the infrastructure of the enemy, and we never lost a Roadrunner. Never lost one. And I says, when somebody first told me about this, you know, that we was going to do this, I says, you're off your rocker. You know? I said, well, you don't have to go into the village. I said, there ain't no way. You know, first off, me. But it's fact, the Roadrunners never lost a man. And I never believed it would have went over. But it really terrorized them. The other thing we did was with there's a Cambodian phrase called ball bean. Ball bean is big surprise. We would take packages of AK-47 ammunition that was made at the Frankfurt Arsenal. Some of it was made in Canada. Chinese communist head stamps wrapped in the same type of rice wax paper around the stripper clips of ammunition. And I had a man who could open a sealed ammunition case, take out some ammo, replace with the ball bean ammo, reseal the case in a second. Just click, 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 and he's got the ammo and he's on his way back. during the period of time, you may ask some of the other men that you interviewed that was grunts during this time, if they ever heard on Armed Forces radio where it says, do not fire any captured weapons. The reason was, the ball bean ammunition, if you put it in a gun and fired it, it would blow the gun up. And it would take your head off. The same time, our PSYOPs people are dropping leaflets. They're flying around this area with the speaker planes. They are playing on the radio, jamming Hanoi radio, overpowering it, telling these people that because of China's Cultural Revolution, their industry's going to pot. And they're having a hell of a lot of quality control with their weaponry. And you remember your buddy when he put the bullet in his gun and blew up? Boy, you could be next. You know, they just got batches and batches of this bad ammunition coming out of China because of this Cultural Revolution. These people are all messed up. Yeah, and we're playing this mind game. And it was to make them think. Because if you made them think, you may have that extra 1 second when it comes down to a showdown.
Yeah, true.
And the Chuhois, and we was telling them to surrender and give themselves up, and hey, your buddy did this, and we fed him. The other operation was a maritime operation that we ran that was a real gem. We went up along the coast of North Vietnam in these little PT boat type things. And mostly the Navy SEALs and Marine Force Recon pulled these numbers. But we had Special Forces, because they went with us, we went with them. It was all one big happy family. Contrary to popular belief, we did coexist real well. And everybody understood what everybody was up against. They went up the coast, and they catch the Vietnamese fishermen. Now, the Vietnamese, a lot of rice. And I guess it's like eating spaghetti. If you don't got nothing to put on it, it's pretty bad. Fish is their big thing. Rice and fish is their main staple. Well, you don't like to eat just plain rice, so you want to put some fish in it. Well, we caught the fishermen. Now, they got this thing that looks like a wicker basket with tar on it. And it's a combination fish holder and lifeboat. We would catch these people, tell them that we caught them, scare the hell out of them, sink their fishing boats, take them down to Tagger Island in Da Nang Bay.
Yeah.
We'd spend a day with them, indoctrinating them, telling them what nice people. If you want, we got you this time, we're going to let you live.
Yeah.
You're going to survive us. We're going to take you home. But if we ever catch you out fishing again, you only fish enough for your family. That's all. No more. And if we catch you out there again, we won't be so nice to you. And we give them bolts of cloth and sewing kits and meat and you name it. And these little transistor radios with one frequency. Our PSYOPs people's radio station. And several of them we caught double dipping. I mean, there were several that we caught more than once.
Yeah.
But they'd take them back up there. And I mean, these boats, when they drop them off in the area, were almost swamped. They were so full of goodies and presents and stuff. I mean, they really loved it. I mean, the boat that they got rid of was a small price to pay for this.
For what they were doing.
So, like I said, we did get a few double dippers. We told them we wasn't going to be too nice to them, but we didn't have any designs of causing anybody any problems.
Yeah.
But then later, we started catching prisoners. The first thing we'd do is give them some fish. And they would eat some rice and fish, and they thought that was great. And they could not understand how plentiful the fish was in the South. When the fish was so shortage up north. And we said, hey, because you guys are going to all this military stuff and building all these guns, and all your energy's going toward fighting the South, who wants peace. In the South, the peaceful people, they're fishing, they're raising rice, and you people are coming down here. And they, oh God, that's terrible, you know. And these people are so nice, and they tell them, you know, we make tapes and play them on the PA systems and fly around. It was a great show, great show. But it was that was some of the behind the scenes. We had mortar rounds, ball bean mortar rounds, that some of our people were black marketing in Saigon. That you drop down a tube, they'd blow up. It was.
I think let's choke. Okay, now it's Wednesday, October the 30th. And we're in our second session, Frank Hitlaw, and let's continue.
Well, continue about some of the psychological warfare operations that we run were interesting, but you know that didn't totally win the war. Long-range patrols that the SF ran were finding the enemy and then letting the larger regular American units go in. I pulled security most of the time I was away from as artillery unit on the first trip, and we moved out to Duck Cove SF camp, and we stayed there. One of the larger operations, we run a thing called Task Force McDonald. It's written about in S.L.A. Marshall's book, West of Cambodia. We worked along the Cambodian border. We had a lot of forward outposts there. And one operation that comes to mind was the fight at Polywally Lake. It was a salt flat, dried mud lake. We run two companies on this operation. It was supposed to check out a village that we had a lot of enemy activity in. There were 6 Americans and 200 strikers, Mountain Guard Strike Force members. 100 of them was going to hold the lake, and the other 100 of us was going to go through the village, and it was called the maneuvers called a classic hammer and anvil. We was going to be the maneuver unit to go through the village. They was going to act as a blocking force. We was the hammer, they were the anvil. And the idea was to smash the enemy between you. And it was a classic tactical maneuver used extensively in Vietnam, along with a thing called the pincers. But we used this hammer and anvil as to secure the place where we'd get picked up with helicopters, and also to act as a blocking force to stop any of the retreating enemy. The lake was about 1,000 meters from the village. We got inserted at first light and moved in a roundabout way, set up just at breakfast time, about 6:30 in the morning. We set up at outside the village, which would be our line of departure, where we lined up to assault the village. We started into the village, and our other group on the LZ called us on the radio and said they was picking up fire, and it's picking up pretty heavy fire. we hadn't gotten anything in the village. And our classic hammer and anvil maneuver ended up as a classic sucker maneuver. We got sucked into this village, and they were waiting on them on the LZ. Well, we weren't complete suckers yet, but we were working into it real swiftly. Things are starting to deteriorate. The LZ's picking up a lot of fire. So they said, forget the village, and we hauled through the jungle as fast as we could. We ran, just double-timed all the way through the real rough terrain. And it was, now I think about it, it's kind of scary because of the booby traps and stuff. It could have been laid for us, but we didn't hit any. We got onto the LZ and we filled in what few gaps that they had where they'd taken some casualties, and completed the circle of the perimeter. As we got in, they closed the gap behind us, and we was encircled on this fairly open area on the lake. And
Could you see them?
oh yeah, they was running right at us.
Yeah.
And
In what strength?
probably regimental strength. There was about 200 of us, or 206 of us actually, and probably pretty close to 2,000 of them.
Mm-hmm.
They had some heavy weaponry. They had mortars. They had GSPH Goranov 12.7 heavy machine guns, and AKs and light shoulder weapons. Yeah, there was a lot of them. And they would run up on us, and we'd run them back, and they'd run up on us, and they'd run us back, and we'd run them back, and this went on for, well, several hours. Still not a lot of concern. Some, but not overly concerned at this point. I got plenty of things working. I got my artillery working. I got TAC air on the line. I got a FAC up overhead working us, and some Sky Raiders coming in en route. And we were just kind of sitting there waiting for this, and we figured we had them at a disadvantage. They had us surrounded, so. But we stayed there on the LZ. A fella showed up in a Charlie, a command control helicopter, a UH-1 D model with all kinds of radio equipment in it. Kept calling himself Thunderbolt 6, and I was calling one time for artillery, and this guy calls and he says, you don't need that. And then I get another call of a guy, I'm calling in talking to my Sky Raiders, and he's sending my Sky Raiders away, and I'm getting PO'd. And finally I told him to get off my push and get out of here, and I don't have to take orders from him, and I don't care who he was. I found out later he was commander of the 25th Infantry Division. He was a 2-star general. He wasn't too pleased with me, but I wasn't too pleased with him.
So those were the 25th Division troops in there?
No, he just come over and nibbed and stuck his nose in where it didn't belong. They were supposed to be coming in, 3/4 Cav was supposed to be coming in to help us. The 3rd Squadron, 4th Cav, never did get there. Finally, well, this fight went on overnight. We did get a couple of people in to resupply, and the next day we're still in this fight, and it's starting to look pretty bad now. It was starting to look awful bleak. Well, that afternoon late, we figured we wasn't going to make it another night. We couldn't hold out. First off, our resupply was down low. Two, we had quite a few casualties, and we hadn't gotten them out yet, which was sapping a lot of our strength. There was a big banyan tree, and I said, after dark tonight, I'm going up the top of that thing, and that's where I'm going to hide. And I had already made my escape and evasion plans, where I was going to have to escape, literally, and evade on my own. I already had my plan made for that night. I got some Sky Raiders and some jets in. Got my FAC working me, and So we took every other man off the line. There's 90 of them. We had about 20 casualties. There was about 90 strikers and 3 Americans. Captain Cunningham, Major Baker, and a Spec 4 named Smith took control of these 90. And when the Sky Raiders bombed, made a corridor. And we figured there's no way we could sit here anymore. Well, we had the Sky Raiders bomb in one area. And they went out. The 93 men went out. And the plan was for them to set up a flanking maneuver and flank them and try and see if we could break out. Well, they had been gone about 5 minutes and I lost contact with them over the radio. So it's a lot of concern.
Who's left in the
There's
in the LZ?
about 93 of us on the LZ.
in the LZ still? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we took half our force.
Right.
Basically, it was the blocking force is what we moved.
Okay.
And we lost contact with them, like I said. They had
So you're just trying to make a keyhole to get out of there.
Right,
Yeah.
they was going to make a keyhole and go out, and then they would move across, laterally across the line, long ways, instead of going straight, charging straight out.
Right.
He's going to hit them edgeways
I get
and
you.
flank them and sweep the line. So you wouldn't hit a position of strength right off the bat. You'd be going toward the weakest area of the line. And plus, with the fire support we had, we was going to concentrate one effort and try and break it. Because things were, like I said, we're getting a little grim there on the drop zone, or the LZ.
Yeah, this is the second day.
The second day, and as a matter of fact, they didn't think we could hold out another hour or two. But being there was one thing. Being back in the rear area was another. They was talking in the unit history. It tells about the fight at Pollywally Lake and the fact that they kept saying, well, we couldn't hold out another hour. And we out on the LZ, we was saying, well, we can't make it. It's going to be rough if it gets dark. But we really never had any doubts in our minds. At least we were trying to keep the good thoughts. Well, like I said, we lost contact with our maneuver force, and we never had any more contact that evening. Well, the third three-quarter cav finally showed up, and I remember looking up, and you can almost hear the bugles because you can see that these tanks in echelon formation. I could have kissed the first one. Come screaming around this dry lake, and they opened fire, and it didn't take long, and the fight was over.
Yeah.
They did not want to stay there and fight with the tanks because they had already shot up. They must have shot up all their RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades, and anti-tank rounds at us.
Yeah.
Where we was tried to dig in. So they must have had a resupply problem with their anti-tank weaponry, because they didn't want to stay, and you just can't fight a tank with a rifle. It just doesn't work. So they pulled back. This is just at dusk now. But we set up a night defensive and figured by this time now we're in a bad situation, because once I lost contact, back up a little bit. When I lost contact with the maneuver, I couldn't call any more TAC air. I couldn't call any more artillery because we didn't know where they was at.
Mm-hmm.
So then the tanks showed up and bailed us out. Well, we set up a night defensive, and it was quiet night. First, quiet night we had in several days. And next morning at first light, we went out to hunt. About 10 yards in front of the perimeter, we found the radio. It took some hits and was disabled, so they just, rather than carry a dead radio, they threw it away. And about 100 yards further, behind the perimeter, or in the enemy positions, we found all of them dead.
Mm.
And 90 dead strikers, and the 3 Americans in the middle.
Mm.
And the 3 Americans had been tortured, mutilated. They set up a defensive position, and the only thing I can tell you is the fact that they put up one hell of a fight, because most of them was out of ammunition, There wasn't a grenade to be found. A lot of pins and spoons. A lot of blood trails. Broken AK rifles. A lot of bandage material out in the brush. Bits of flesh, blood trails. There was a... They left in a hurry and they took a few with them. But that was... up to that point, that was the worst mess I was ever in my life.
Yeah.
Kind of scary little deal.
Were you wounded on this operation?
No, I didn't get wounded on that operation. Come out of it completely, with everything intact. Now, it was about a month after that, just a little bit before Christmas, was when I got wounded. I was out on a maneuver, and we got hit out in a rice paddy out in the open, and got shot at with a machine gun, and of course we all hit the dirt, and I got the top of my knee skinned off, and I got a hole, a punji stick hole in my leg, and got my knee skinned off with a piece of shrapnel. It just took the hide off. And when I went down, I got a punji stick in the side of my leg, which put I got a big hole yet in my leg, about the size of a dime around, and a nice indentation in my leg from it. And they took me to the hospital, and I had so short a time left in country that they just sent me on to Japan, and I spent about 3 months in Japan. I got Japan on Christmas Eve.
What'd you do in Japan then?
Stayed at Camp Zama Army Hospital, and then after I got healed up enough, they put me over in a medical holding company, and I just laid around, did nothing.
Yeah. How about some of the booby traps that the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese...
The North Vietnamese didn't use a lot of booby traps. They used mines, regular Soviet and Chinese mines, but the Viet Cong used an expedient weaponry. There's a lot of booby traps.
What was their favorite?
Well,
It couldn't have been your favorite, though.
well, their favorite, it just run the gamut. It was whatever was at hand. From something as I'm going to say as mundane as a hand grenade stuffed in a tin can that's tied to a pole with a string tied, the pin pulled out of the grenade, and you put the grenade in a can to hold the handle down, and just tie a string around it and let it pull the thing out and blow up. Something as it didn't take a lot of creativity to do something like that. Two, I seen a crossbow. I think the neatest one I ever seen was a crossbow to shoot down a helicopter.
And it worked?
It took the helicopter out of action. It didn't shoot it down because it crashed, but they sent it away with about a 6-foot bamboo bolt stuck through the tail boom. It was interesting. It was a big crossbow, and hidden on a particular place where it looked like we might make a use for a LZ, with a bamboo or banana leaf on a trigger. So when the rotor wash of the helicopter blew down, that's give us some surface area, and it tripped the trigger and shot the crossbow bolt straight up in the air. And another thing I seen was one with a string across the drop zone with a big crossbow to shoot one across. It was a tripwire for helicopters. I seen mines in the tops of trees that would go off when the helicopters went by, because the rotor wash would blow the trees and make them just like in a windstorm.
Yeah.
And they would tighten up these things, and it looked kind of like what the South American gauchos, the bolos, with the 3 balls on it. Well, they'd have 3 mines and 3 strings, and they'd be all tied together rigidly. So once these things started shaking, it'd set the mines off, and actually had a mine for a helicopter.
Yeah. Did you ever hear of them working?
Yes, they did work.
Yeah.
I never seen one work, but I had helicopter crews tell me that you have to be careful of the things. I've found the mines. Malayan whip traps, which is a kind of like a mechanical fly swatter. Instead of having a flat thing to swat you, it's a framework with bamboo spikes in it. It'll whip across. It's called a Malayan whip. Seen a ball mud with punji sticks hooked back up into a tree, and they'd swing down a trail, which would definitely spoil your day. Kind of looked like a big mace with these spikes on it. It was probably weighed about 90 or 100 pounds, so it'd get a pretty good swing coming out of a tree. If it hit you, it'd ruin your day. I think the nastiest, probably the nastiest, and I did see one of the guy get into one of them, was some of the foot traps. One of their favorites for simple expediency, bamboo. A piece of bamboo cut. So you had a tubular piece, and through one of the lower notches, or the joints, stick a nail through, and you could put a rifle shell in there, so the primer's sitting on its nail, bury those in a trail. Very primitive weapon, a shotgun shell or a 45 round. You step on it, it's gonna go through your foot, and it'll make you a casualty real quick. The other one is dig a T-shaped hole, probably 18 inches across, and maybe 18 inches square for the top, and then they'll dig a T-shaped hole, and they'll put a couple of boards with maybe 6 to 10 spiked nails, and they'll take a sharp object like a hatchet or something, and they'll rough up these nails so they got barbs in them, and they set them on these two 2x4s so they butt together over the deeper portion of the hole. When you come by, and they'll camouflage the top of this, of course, and if you step on it, as your foot goes down, these two boards come up on each side, and they'll shove these, the weight of your body going down in this other hole will shove these spikes into your ankles. Now, you had the bottom of the new jungle boots were spike proof, and they had a real thin metal plate in them. Well, the sides of them weren't. And I seen a guy get into one of those, and that was about as painful. It's not a pleasant experience to have somebody drive spiked 10-penny nails into your ankle.
That's right.
It was not a pleasant experience at all.
Punji sticks, did you see many punji sticks? Or not?
Thousands of them. I wish I had a penny for every punji stick I seen.
Yeah.
I wish I had a penny for every punji stick I set.
Yeah. You guys set them also?
Yes, at our SF camp, we set them up. Usually not out on the road. If we was out playing out in the jungle, we wouldn't set them up because it was just too much labor intensive. But
tell me, I'm your grandson. I'm 50 years from now. Tell me what a punji stick is, how you made them, how big they were, and then how'd you set them, and how did they operate?
They operate real simple. They're basically a booby trap. And booby trap means to trap the booby. They cannot be.
Pretty
good. And who wants to be the boob that gets trapped? Obviously, a punji stick is a piece of bamboo. They would temper it in a fire. They would heat this in a fire, and it'd get hot, and it just gets like steel. And they'd use a piece of glass, and they'd split it. Oh, I'm going to say maybe 3/8 of an inch wide. Split the bamboo, these larger pieces of bamboo. So out of one large section of bamboo, or one large trunk. And the bamboo I'm talking about is not like you find in a bamboo fishing pole. I'm talking bamboo 5-6 inches in diameter, the size of a tree. So when you cut a section of this about 18 inches long, and you split it up around the,
3/8 pieces. Okay,
you get quite a few.
correct.
Then you heat it up, you split it you take a piece of glass and you shave it down to a point. And bamboo will shave down just like a razor. I mean, it is real, real sharp. And then you burn this in a fire. You don't burn it, but you heat it in a fire. It dries it out and makes it very, very brittle. Then if there's any touching up, they'll take glass and they'll go over it again. And you plant these things, where we planted them, it was in a ditch. Okay, we put barbed wire up a thing called tanglefoot, which is a barbed wire fencing. Much like you'd find on a farm here, except we added to that and we put stakes out so it was like a Christmas tree effect. And you'd have, instead of just tied to the fence post, it would come down in a Christmas tree and it'd be like 6 or 7 feet on each side of the post. So, and then you tie these together with cross wires and stuff, and it's called tanglefoot. Just makes it tough to get through. Then we had a ditch, just plain mud, and in this ditch we filled up with bungee sticks. Now you angle them toward the way you expect the enemy to go.
Now you would basically do this every time you'd set up a perimeter. You'd ditch it.
No, a base camp, a big,
base camp.
a special forces operational camp, an 18 camp. If you're going to set in for overnight, you wouldn't do this because there's just too much work involved. So you got the thing sharpened up and you put them in, angled down toward the way at a maybe I'm going to say a 70-degree angle off vertical, with the points going in the direction. So anybody that comes in, they have to go against the grain of these things. And they obviously they're so close together. There's I'm going to say in a foot square you'd probably plant 5 or 6 of them.
And how high would they be out of the ground then?
8-10 inches. I mean, there was no hiding them. I mean, this was open.
Yeah.
But what it would be a place where they would have to cross that would be unpleasant, and it'd be completely in the open, and they obviously couldn't hit the ground and get down on their bellies
To get in.
It'd be just like mating with a porcupine. I mean, it's just no way you can do it.
Did both sides have this habit of putting human excrement on?
Well, we didn't, but
That was a favorite trick of the Viet Cong.
yeah, because one of the things you did, if you got a punji stick, you always sent the guy in, you stuck it right through his shirt and right into his lapel, because then they could check the punji stick, the actual one he got stuck with, and see what kind of material it had on it, or if it had anything on it. They'd know how to treat him. They could find out what type of bacteria is on it, and they'd know how to treat the wound. Sometimes the reason punji sticks left nasty scars was the fact they didn't sew them up because of the infection problem. They just left them open, let them drain.
Now, the one that got you had anything on it?
Yeah, but it didn't have it. It really didn't. They with the antibiotics, it wasn't. The only time it's really bad is if they don't catch it
Right away.
Yeah, if they don't catch it right away, or if you get just a little scratch from one and you ignore it. If you get punctured by one, you're going to the hospital and you're going to get loaded up with antibiotics.
Yeah.
But if you get just a little scratch or something like that, then it opens you up for infections. And once you got them, you got them. And I had quite a bit of trouble getting rid of infections for a long time afterwards.
Now, you've been in country 8 months or 9 months? The first tour.
12 months.
But you were going to Japan.
Right. I was in Vietnam for actually 12 and a half months.
And then you sent to Japan for another 3 months.
Yeah,
Okay.
recovering in the hospital.
Okay.
I was single. I didn't
Now,
care.
I didn't hear anything about R&R.
Went to Bangkok on R&R.
Well, why did you pick Bangkok, and what did you do, and what was it like?
I don't remember a lot. I didn't pick Bangkok. A guy was supposed to go to Bangkok and canceled. For some reason, he couldn't go.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we got an opening for R&R in Bangkok. Anybody want to go? And I said, hell, I'll go.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. So I went to Bangkok. It was interesting. Got very drunk.
Yeah.
And stayed drunk for about a week. Spent about $2,500 and don't have a damn thing to show for it.
Mm-hmm.
I did when I was over there. I bought a cat's eye or a star sapphire pinky ring and a Rolex watch. Everybody bought a Rolex watch. Cost me $500 for that Rolex watch. But I was going back to Vietnam. Figured, what good's money over there? You know, it's, I don't know, it's one of them things where you say, hey, I know I got money today, I might get killed tomorrow, and if I don't get killed, I'm just going to have more money tomorrow, because it doesn't take me anything to live over there.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the government furnished my cigarettes and my food and my clothes, and, you know, so I really didn't need a lot of money. But I did, I stayed at the Olympia Hotel in Bangkok, and like I said, I got very drunk. They were just finishing the hotel when I moved in, and God, I got wiped out I stayed drunk for a week. Half the time it was a fog. I don't even know where I was at. I remember going to the Reptile Institute once, and then one night I do remember Terry Tyner from Wabash. Terry was an air traffic controller in the Air Force. He was stationed over at Bunker Hill, and I'd known him from hanging around the airport and airplanes and stuff in the past. And when I got my orders for Vietnam, he had gotten his for Thailand. Well, my second or third day there, he was telling me about how this was a hardship tour and couldn't take his wife and all this, blah, 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 and he'll probably be sleeping in a tent somewhere in a jungle, and this was not going to be any fun. Well, on a whim, I called base locator service at Da Nang, Bangkok International Airport. He was there. I asked where he lived. They told me. I caught a cab over there. Well, it's right across the street from the U.S. Embassy.
Uh-huh.
Hell of an apartment complex. He had a swimming pool and a balcony and a patio, and him and this other Air Force guy lived in this house. And I heard they said he was off duty, so I wild guess he'd probably be home. So I went up and I knocked on Terry's door. He opened the door, and I thought he was going to wet his pants. What are you doing here? So we went out to the place called Lido that night. Got pretty drunk, had a good time. Went to I don't know, we went to the Reptile Institute or something that afternoon. I think it was the only day I was sober in Bangkok. Till that evening. We got pretty drunk, both of us did. It was a lot of fun.
Before we were interrupted there, you and I were talking, and I was asking you in the months that you were there in the conversations, nothing relative to, nothing has been mentioned anyhow, relative to drugs and alcohol.
Well, we didn't have a problem
Why not?
because we was combat soldiers. And combat soldiers did not have the problem with drugs and alcohol that the rear echelon bozos had.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very, very tight elite unit. We depended on each other, and we did not mess with drugs.
Now, you were living and soldiering with the Monte Guides.
That's right.
What are their personal habits?
Whatever we wanted them to be.
The Monte Guides are not addicted to morphine or
Betel
hashish
nut.
or betel nut.
That's about it.
Yeah,
Which is kind of a local anesthetic. They chewed
yeah.
because they had, their dental hygiene and stuff wasn't the best. So they had a lot of tooth problems.
Uh-huh.
And they would chew this betel nut, which turned their teeth black.
Uh-huh.
The old ladies would sit and chew the betel nut. And it would anesthetize their teeth.
Uh-huh.
So it was a kind of a local anesthetic. Didn't have any problem. We just didn't have any drug problems.
Mhm.
We just didn't have a drug problem. Combat troops, to the best of my knowledge, didn't have the problem because we had to go out and fight. The troops that had the problems, to my knowledge, were the guys that were stuck in the rear areas. They had it easier than they had it over here in the States
Mhm.
because it was part of the winning the hearts and minds. Was teaching these Vietnamese how to do some of our things.
Beer always available?
Yeah. Matter of fact, we'd trade captured weaponry for beer. There was a Mauser rifle. It was a version of the Chinese version of 98K, World War II Mauser. And it was a desirable weapon because it was the only one we could bring back. It was bolt action. Any automatic weapon you couldn't bring back. And that's the PPSHs and the AKs and can't even think of the name of it now, but anyhow, it's the other assault rifle, battle rifle. We're all semi-automatic and full automatic. You couldn't bring one back. So anytime we'd capture those, we'd send them on up through intelligence to the rear area like we were supposed to, or any explosives. Any bayonets, pith helmets, belt buckles, and Mausers, we kept.
Mhm.
We kept them out the SF camp. I took one down to First Log Command, and I traded a Mauser rifle for 2 pallets of beer and 2 pallets of Coke. Each pallet had 64 cases, plus a 5-ton truck and a trailer to haul them home. That's what I traded for a Mauser, and a belt buckle, and it was a Chinese Red Star belt buckle, and a pith helmet with a red star on it. And so it was pretty good trade.
I was reading in this book on the Special Forces that in the Special Forces camps that basically they always had refrigeration and cold beer
Right.
and cold Coke.
Right?
Was that your experience?
Yeah, that's how we got it. Traded weapons to the First Log Command. These-
Did the Monte Guards, did they drink
yes, Coke.
Coke?
They'd drink a little. They'd drink the Bommy Ba, which is the beer LaRue 33. Bommy Ba is Vietnamese for 33.
What kind of a beer was it? That was
It was a local rice beer, and it would kill a moose. Had a picture of a tagger on it. We always called it tagger piss. It was some rotten stuff. Anybody that liked that would go out here and lick the gutter. It was terrible. That was the nastiest stuff. But yeah, the Bomby Ba, they like that, and their Coke, which was bottled in Saigon, was a lot sweeter and a little flatter. But I paid in the villages. And there was an orange drink that they had.
sort of like an Orange Crush.
Yeah, it was a local.
That's all over the world. I
Yeah,
think.
it was some kind of local
Yeah.
orange drink that we could find. Had a French name. But mostly they'd drink beer, but not any more than anybody else. Combat troops didn't have the drug problems. And I'm talking 65 and 66.
Yeah.
Combat troops did not have the drug problems. The people who had the problems were the ones back in the First Log Command who didn't have a job. I mean, these people were so far back they didn't even issue weapons.
Mhm.
I mean, they never even had rifles issued to them because they was afraid they was going to shoot one another. I mean, they wasn't a danger to the enemy; they was a danger to each other. Getting there's stoned or drunk and shooting somebody, mostly themselves. What causes, in my opinion, people to turn to alcohol and drugs? Boredom. I mean, you get bored sitting around doing nothing because you got 5 Vietnamese doing your job, and you just got to sit and watch them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if 5 can't do your job, go hire 10. So you're basically sitting there doing nothing, and you get bored. So they start drinking, and they start carousing. And when the alcohol doesn't do a good job, we start into the pot, and that isn't a big enough kick anymore. We're still bored. We go into heavier stuff. The heroin, cocaine wasn't a big deal then, but it is now. But heroin and you know, we found drugs. Don't get me wrong. Most of one guy there, we found an enemy soldier one time. This guy was blown to bits. He just sit there and grinned. And I mean, he died there sitting there grinning. I mean, yeah, I thought that was hilarious. I mean, what's this guy, you know, he's sitting there, he's all blown up, and he's sitting there smiling about it. So we found that he had quite a load of morphine on him. So he was probably about half zapped when he got wounded.
Then you go back to any other interesting experiences on this first tour with these. You're with the Montaguard forces
Right.
the whole year,
Right.
and was this sort of an odd collection when you get all these families in this sort of screwy way to fight a war?
Yeah. Well, no, it wasn't a screwy way to fight a war. Matter of fact, it was the ideal way to fight a war.
Yeah.
These people were good fighters.
Yeah.
Don't have any, because they may have lacked some, you know, they look more like the Aborigines, but we put them in camouflage fatigues and we give them rifles and we told them to fight, and by God they fought. One interesting story I think is it's semi. I'm gonna equate it with a skydiving story. The difference between comedy and tragedy in skydiving was comedies when you have to use your reserve, tragedies when I have to use mine. We moved to Mountain Yard Village. Now their main thing was their rice crop and their tea bushes. They loved them little tea bushes. And they're kind of like a little hedge. Oh, and that's bucks to them. I mean, it takes a long time to grow one of them little bushes.
Yeah.
So we moved this village into a pacified area down by Chio Rio, which was south, 40 miles. But it was south 40 miles through pretty rough country and pretty good place to get ambushed. So we got everything moved. We got these people on this C-130, and the only thing left was 9 of these little tea bushes. So I was in charge of these 9 little tea bushes they dug up, and we put them on a helicopter, an H model or D model then. It was slick. And I am sitting in the jump seat against what's called the hellhole. The seating arrangement is a inverted U or horseshoe shape, and back at the back end of this, or what would be the pilot and co-pilot, would sit at the bottom of the U, the rounded portion, because the transmission and engine come up into that portion. So you had seats up each side, then across the front, and then there was like a 10-foot area in the slick, or maybe a 6-foot area, and then you had the pilot and co-pilot seat. Well, I'm sitting right there in the middle, and we load the tea bushes on, and I'm sitting there, and I put the headphones over my head, for the intercom, mostly to blank out the noise around me. Now they got this thing switched on hot mic so you can hear everybody talking. So we just took off, reached down my fatigue pants pocket, my cargo pocket, and pulled out whatever I was reading. It was some kind of book or paperback I was reading. And no more than got into the first page, we've been off the ground about 5 minutes, and something out of the corner of my eye moved and caught my eye. And when I seen what moved, I about wet my pants. I had about a 6-foot brown-gray cobra snake. And I immediately jumped up on top of the seat, probably 4 feet from me. And I yelled, "Cobra!" And the pilot, thinking I meant gunship cobra, thought maybe we was in for a mid-air collision, shoved the stick forward and looked over the seat. And when he shoved the stick forward, of course, that made the helicopter angle downward, slid on this slick metal floor, goes this snake sliding up toward the co-pilot or the pilot's seat.
Yeah.
Well, he sees this ball of snake, and he immediately pulls the nose up and slides it back. The crew chief, had a pump shotgun for his own personal weapon. It was sawed off into some wicked looking, it looked like a Model 97 Winchester with a hammer on it. It was a wicked looking thing. Jumps up on top of the seat. I got my .45 out, and they're saying, "Don't shoot at the Cobra. Don't shoot inside the helicopter because you'll always shoot us down from the inside." And I said, I'm saying to myself, this son of a gun comes up here and gets close to the seat, kiss it goodbye because I'm going to blow his fanny to kingdom come. The snake now is sliding into the hellhole, or down the side of the well, with the gunner. The gunner now...
He doesn't know it?
Oh, yeah, he knows it. He's standing on his seat with his shotgun, and he's jacking around into it, and he's telling the pilot he's going to shoot him if he doesn't put the nose down. So now everybody's up on their seats except the pilot and co-pilot. The snake gets back and around the corner, and I'm standing there holding on to a litter pole that's in this thing, scared to death. Everybody's scared to death. They've done a 180. We're hauling ass back to where we come from. The crew chief popped the emergency escape hatch on the window, which is hinged like a bus window, and crawled outside and was standing outside on the skid. And we landed. He took off, and we was all standing around there with our guns, and we got the mountain yards, and they hooked these T-bushes and pulled them off. And never did find the damn snake.
Oh, really?
Never did. I don't know how he got away or where he got to, but we couldn't find him. Maybe it's just, we didn't find him. But that was I talk about. I have always called that story a hiss and a miss or something. I don't know. It was
wild.
It was wild it was wild as 10 minutes I ever spent in my life. But it'd be kind of like being in a Volkswagen bus with a 6-foot Cobra in there with you. It was not a pleasant experience.
What experiences did you have with rats?
I killed a whole bunch of them once. Me and another guy had a bet on who could kill the most rats. So we had rats that was big as possums. I suppose there's other people told you how big rats get over there. Oriental rats are they big. It didn't happen to me, but I know several people. If you got bit by one, it was automatic rabies shots. A friend of mine fell asleep, and he was munching on some peanut butter and crackers or cheese and crackers or something like that. And he woke up and he felt something tickling around his nose, and a rat was eating the scraps of peanut butter cracker off his face, and I think he about had the big one there. So I would call him Rat Face after that because I figured the rat was trying to kiss him. But that was a unique experience for him. I don't know, but our dump, where our dump was, we had to go out on perimeter, and we'd set up on perimeter. And we had one of our places over in the corner was near where we dumped our trash, so we took a C ration can, and I packed it full of C4 and put a detonator from a Claymore in it. And I took all the old C rations that nobody ever ate, and we opened them up, poured them all around this thing. We set them up in a big pile. It kind of looked like about an 8-tiered Christmas or wedding cake with an explosive in the middle. And that evening, when the rats come out, it looked like a shark feeding frenzy over there. And I tagged off about 4 ounces of C4 and blew rats and C ration cans all over the compound. They didn't like me at all for that. They said, don't do that no more. They found dead rats up on the roof and everything else.
Do the Monster guides, do they eat rats?
I never seen them eat rats. Didn't live with them. Rats, I think, live better than some of them. But that was an interesting. Oh, another semi-humorous story was Barry Sadler that wrote the song, The Ballad of the Green Berets. Also on Robin Moore's book, Inside the Green Berets, or the Green Berets that Robin Moore wrote. The guy on the cover is Barry Sadler.
Mm-hmm.
He was the model for the cover for that, so not many people really know about that, but yeah, he was the model for the cover. He looked the part, but it's a good thing he could write songs because he didn't have very much else on the ball.
Was he in your outfit? Your special
Yeah,
outfit?
he was in the same organization. He was with an A team. He was staff sergeant, and he was out on one of the A teams. He was at a camp called Play de Lim, which was about 10 miles from where our base camp, and off and on we'd have to go out there and help them, and we'd set up for the night. If they'd have people on R&R or something more, intel would say, hey, there's supposed to be a build-up around Play de Lim or something, or Play Me. We'd go out there and set up just to augment them, or if we was running operations out there, we'd come in, set up a night defensive, maybe at their camp or outside their camp. So
I saw something about him in the paper the other day, but I can't remember what it was.
yeah, I'd seen something here not too long ago, but
Nothing important.
yeah. But anyhow, I think he's trying to get his singing career back on track. Barry Sadler got wounded, and he did all the writing of these songs over in Japan, in the hospital. And how he got wounded was with a punji stick, but it was one of ours. He got drunk one night, and he had to go out and check the perimeter. Went out and checked the perimeter, and he fell into our punji pit, and he got a punji stick stuck through his leg. But he was drunk, and it was one of ours. But it was made into quite a deal. I'm sure he got a Purple Heart for it, but PR people and press people really, that was involved in that song, the record people really made him out to be some hero. How he got this punji stick shoved through his leg, and it was they say he was about half blasted, and it was one of ours. That was an interesting little story, but there was some crazy things happened up there. I think there was a unique thing that happened. You didn't like the media people working with you. Mm-hmm. Usually you had problems. And foreign media was even worse. Well, when we was working Task Force McDonald, we run into a situation where they said there was a media team from French TV, because the French had a lot of ties there, was doing a documentary on the Special Forces operations in Vietnam. And I said, oh boy, and I ended up having to take them out. It was the greatest thing. I learned more. The fellow who was the director had fought the Vietnamese and the Viet Minh and was at Dien Bien Phu. He knew more about fighting unconventional guerrilla warfare than any other man I've ever met in my life, and it was a real treat to learn some of the techniques from this guy. We never got ambushed. He could pick up an ambush. He could smell them. I mean, he was just one of them people. He knew his job. I mean, he was good. But he had been a colonel in the French Foreign Legion, French Airborne, at Dien Bien Phu.
Huh.
And he was really good. And the whole team was tough. They were good people.
Did you have much exposure to any other media people?
A couple times. A couple of stories I learned. A couple things I learned was if you had a camera and you was out on an operation, a lot of these stringers for AP and UPI would buy your film out of your camera.
Mm-hmm.
They'd never been to the fight. They'd ask you, did you take any pictures while you was out there? Well, I'll give you $50 for the film in your camera. Of course, if they got the film, they got the negatives, they got the rights to it.
Uh-huh.
You know, prove it was yours.
Uh-huh.
But most of those pictures that was taken in the field were taken by GIs. I'm going to say a third of them were taken by GIs and credited to some of these people that never got outside of a base camp or large camp.
Yeah.
It was unique. And one time they wanted us, NBC wanted us to recreate a battle that they didn't get to. And I told them I didn't think it was appropriate to do it. And they told me that it was appropriate for me to do it, our headquarters. So I made it a training thing. And we went up and we shot up the jungle and called in some artillery and run across this village that we had already cleaned out. It was quite a unique experience. There was a documentary that I was working at a security for some of the team that was filming it, and I got my mug on that. My mother seen me.
When you finished up your first tour of duty then in Japan, and then what happened?
Well, they said you got a physical profile that was very minor. Meant I had something wrong with me, a temporary profile.
Yeah.
It was a very minor profile, but I couldn't go in Special Forces. You cannot have any type of profile. Well, I had less than a year left in the Army. And I said, well, send me to Fort Campbell. I said, I can keep my jump pay, and I'll just kind of, it's close to home, closer than Fort Bragg. And I said, I'll just live out my lifetime, my military career as comfortably as I could. Well, I come home. Oh, and I went back, I come home, I was home for about 40 days. And like I said, I've been 3 months in Japan. And I've been home. They just come and got me one day over there and said, you're going home. And I said, when? They said, tomorrow afternoon. So I moved down to Camp Zama, cleared the post, took some papers around, got cleared. Next day I was on an airplane for home. With the jet travel, and I flew commercial back all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And took off from Tokyo Haneda International Airport all by myself, and got off plane at Seattle, changed planes, went down to San Fran, and I stayed at San Fran long enough to go down to Letterman Hospital at Presidio. Just right at the foot of the Golden Gate. I seen some friends of mine that was in the hospital there. Was from California, that I'd been in the hospital with in Japan. I stopped and seen a couple of them. Calling back to Indiana, about froze to death. It was dead of winter. Got in, called home, nobody home. It's a weekday during the day, nobody home. I had gotten into Fort Wayne about 10 o'clock in the morning. Actually, the morning I left at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the end of January, the 22nd January of 67. And I got into Fort Wayne at 10 o'clock in the morning on 22nd of January. And there was a fellow there got off the plane with me, civilian. And now I'm saying, now I got this close, now how am I going to get the rest of the way home? He was from Peru. He said, I'm going down. He said, I'll just bring you down and drop me off.
Yeah.
So I come back. I spent 40 days at home. Went to Fort Campbell. Checked in the replacement depot down there. Got everything kind of all caught up. And they said, put me in a line outfit, an infantry outfit. I said, man, this doesn't sound like any fun at all. And a guy come through and he says, hey, how would you like to be in the aviation battalion? I says, hey. And he gave me this big spiel, this lieutenant gave me this big spiel about how they stay out on the air base. They don't live in division row. They got individual rooms, or two guys for a room. Live in the Air Force barracks. They eat in the Air Force mess hall. Got their own club out there, the NCO club. I says, sounds like a good deal to me. They said, well, we got several jobs. You know, you can be a crew chief and, you know, or a mechanic and all this, blah, blah, blah. Or you can be a fuel specialist, or we got this. And he said, well, we got one opening here. He said, I don't know if you'd want it or not. It's for crash rescue firemen. And I says, I never seen an overworked fireman in my life. And they said, well, we really don't have to do anything because the Air Force takes care of the fire on the base. I told them I wanted to be a gunner, and they said, nah, we don't have any, there's no slots stateside. So they put me in this job as a crash rescue fireman. And I went out to the aviation battalion, of course. They didn't have a job for me. So I ended up driving people back and forth to school. I was company R&U man, repairing utilities, broken windows, fixed tile, unstopped plumbing. It was my job. Horse trading for coffee, so we always had coffee for the orderly room. Drive the company commander around. Because we was away from the main part of the division area and the cantonment area, we had to move, you know, anything that had to go down to headquarters, you know, anybody that had to go down to personnel or anything, I took them down there in the company jeep. Any school I went to. I went to so many schools, there'd be a 2-day school. Gonna fire a bazooka. I went. 2-day school to riot control agents. I went. That and skydive for this, run the parachute club down there, and I really was just kind of company flunky. I really didn't have a job.
What was your rank?
I was an E4 at the time. And I really didn't have a job. I mean, you know, they didn't need me. I went to, you know, like I said, I must have went to a dozen schools, these 3-day schools. Every time I turned around, there'd be an allocation down. I was division runner-up for Division Soldier of the Month. I was Battalion Soldier of the Month. Didn't have anything to do. Like I said, I just kind of, you know, it was a snap being Soldier of the Month. I went to all the schools. You know, I knew I went everywhere. I went to a 3-day school to learn how to climb telephone poles, or a 3-week school to learn how to climb telephone poles and string wire and operate a switch. Yeah, I went to Division Signal School and learned how to string wire. I went to, so then, July 67, I'm bouncing through the company area and the first sergeant put the grabs on me. It was, Saturday morning. He says, Hitlaw, he said, I need you to go over to arms room, get your gas mask, get your rifle, get your clips, get your bayonet, and I need you to fall out with your A bag and full war gear. And I said, what in the... He said, I can't tell you what it's about. He said, I just need you back here immediately. So I run around like a one-legged chicken, which A bag meant fatigues, just what you need for, your fatigues, your Army issue of stuff, no civilian equipment.
Yeah.
And full complement of clips, empty clips, magazines for the M16, a bayonet, gas mask. I said, boy, this is going to be tricky. What's going on? So I went back there, and my dog tags, my ID card, and they checked everything, shot record, and it said, okay, there's a truck outside, go put your stuff on it. And there's about 4 of us from my unit. We loaded our stuff up, and lo and behold, they took us on over to the ramp, and there was about 400 men over there that they had cabbaged onto in 101st. Put us on a whole stack of C-130s, trucks, jeeps. They sent some helicopters up with gas dispersing equipment. That's how I ended up. That's how they got us. And they wouldn't tell us, where are you going? Where are we going? Wouldn't tell us. We took off and we flew around, and about an hour and a half we started coming down, and we landed, and I remember looking out, because there's not many windows in a C-130. I remember cranking my head around, looking out, and seeing this thing said, welcome to Selfridge Air Force Base. In Detroit. Riot duty. Yeah. I said, God, I know where I'm at. I'm back home. Yeah. And I ended up spending my time in a school at 12th Woodmere, and running night patrols with the city police. They had an NCO. I had been promoted by this time. We had an NCO, which was me, a driver, and a Detroit city cop, because he had powers of arrest. Yeah. And kind of worked together on this.
Were you in Army vehicles?
Yeah. Well, we was. We was in a Jeep, and a couple exciting things happened up there during the riots. One, we got the fire trucks were going down this one street where a bunch of fires going. They had burning cars and stuff down there in the street, and they said, keep this intersection open. So they give me a squad, 12 men, and they said, keep this intersection open. Well, we get a hell of a nasty crowd because we was a focal point there, and get a hell of a nasty crowd filled up around us. And this is all in the morning, and we sit there and we sit there and we sit there, and about 6 o'clock, the crowd's really getting angry, and they're throwing a few rocks at us and some garbage, and maybe a brick or two. Nothing exceptionally terrible at this point. Some eggs and things like that. Nothing that's other. The bricks could hurt you, but obviously, but there wasn't that much that you could kind of keep an eye on what was going on. You could see them coming. They finally told us to go ahead and move. They wouldn't let us move away from this intersection there. Finally, it was near Patton Park, and they told us to go ahead and set up an echelon formation across the road, use tear gas, we have to, and fix bayonets and move them out, move this crowd down into the park where they couldn't really do any damage, because they was kind of getting tired of this. So we made quite a show about putting on a gas mask, fixing the bayonets, and we formed up, and I had a bag of these baseball grenades. They got about a 38 blank for an explosive charge. Not enough that's going to hurt anything. I mean, it's go pop. But they got powdered CS, which is about to consist of talcum powder, real fine. And they're about the size of a hard ball. You got a little button type safety catch on top, and a regular ring with a cotter key through it that's spread out so it doesn't fall out. And depending on which finger you put on the little button to hold down, and they got a 2-second delay on them, is all. These are nice because the burning type that look like a tin can, they can wrap newspaper and throw them back at you. And them babies are hot. You wouldn't want one of them getting on you. So, plus they can, simple fact they can throw them back at you. These pop, and there ain't nothing but a handful of dust to throw back.
Yeah.
And I was throwing these grenades, these things over in front of the crowd, and this one guy threw a brick, and he just kept coming to the forefront, Every time we'd get him moving, well, it seemed like I'd see this one guy up there throwing something or trying to incite something. So I wound up and I fired one of these tear gas grenades at him, and I hit him right in the forehead when it blew up. And it kind of coated him with tear gas. And I just put this white film over him, powder film over him. And the guy was out there, and it looked about as close as, the only way to describe it is like a water bug that just spins around, doesn't go nowhere. I never seen anybody scream and yell, and the CS is nasty stuff. It's really nasty. It's the worst kind of tear gas anybody's ever up with. We was going to use the gas dispersers on the helicopter, but that is a mess. I mean, because you can't pinpoint it. They put out a lot of gas.
Wow.
So in a city, you got innocent people, and you can't just gas the whole city, which they would have. They was capable of doing. We had 2 helicopters up there with 500 pounds of this powdered CS on each one of them, and tubes that come out the side, so they just fly down the streets and they just dust this thing like a crop duster. Yeah. So, I spent about 10 days up there, and generally the people were real nice to us. They brought food and stuff down. We didn't have to cook. We had our mess hall people up there. They never cooked. Donut shops would bring us big trays of donuts, and chicken places would bring us big trays of chicken.
Well, I imagine they were so damn glad to get law and order established. It's a terrible thing.
Oh yeah, it was.
Isn't it terrible to see anarchy and?
On both sides. I was pretty close to the Algiers Motel when that situation went down, and one outside of Precinct Police Station, there's a tenement house. And the only time I was actually fired on up there, the guy started popping a few shots around with a .22. And you can tell a .22 because it's subsonic. It's got a hissing sound when a bullet goes by. Anything heavier or faster cracks. You hear a real sharp tick when it goes by. And what that is a shock wave coming off the bullet. And it's a sonic boom. But it's a real sharp click. And the .22 was popping away. It was about a 4-story tenement building here. And it had been cleared out on each side. I mean, there was no buildings around it. It kind of sit there all by itself. And said, this is an ideal plan or time to catch one of these people that's really inciting this thing. So I took my squad and I had them secure the bottom of the building. We had the building surrounded. You got to take your time. And I called the airport, and I had a helicopter en route from Detroit City Airport. Took it about 10 minutes to get there. We had the bottom of the building. Guy couldn't get away. I was going to put a team in on the roof. Then we was going to go door to door on the inside. Because he couldn't get away. We had him locked in this building. and said, boy, this is going to be, you know. And about this time, I heard this god-awful rumble and roar, and I look up the street, and here comes the Michigan National Guard in an armored personnel carrier, and they did a neutral steer turn, a 90-degree turn, right out in front of this building, and the guy started at the top of it with a .50 caliber machine gun and started firing on this building, and it was knocking off pieces of cement that weighed 15 pounds or better. I mean, and I just called my crew and my squad, and I said, get out of there.
Yeah.
You know, this guy's a maniac.
Yeah.
Never did find the guy. You know, he got away in the confusion. But we had the situation secured. Take your time, do the job right, but no, you get some maniac, you know, and there was innocent people in the building. I didn't want to assault the building. You know, we could have what we had, but why? You know, nobody was going anywhere. Take our time, but no, this guy gets in there with a .50 and just shoots the hell out of the front of the building, and all it did was scare everybody, and the guy ended up getting away in the confusion. It was a pretty nasty deal.
Let me pause there for a second. Okay, we were talking about you were called to duty in 1966 for the riots in Detroit.
67.
67 riots in Detroit.
Mm-hmm. I spent about 12 days up there, all in Detroit, and then went back to Campbell and kind of stood down. And we get word that that the rest of the 101st Division is going to Vietnam. Well, I was short enough that I would have, now this is in August, August. I'm short enough that I'm going to have to go. I can't stay there till the time they leave in December. I'm due to get out in October 15th. They said, you're going to have to go because we got to fill your slot with somebody who can go over with us to Vietnam again, or when the unit goes as a unit. We're going to have to fill your slot, so we're going to send you to Fort Bragg. Well, I said, basically, I don't have a job. I've been to Vietnam once. I know I'm going to fly missions as a door gunner. But by the same token, I know I'm a fireman. Flying is strictly voluntary thing. I know the worst I can end up is a fireman in a base camp. That ain't no bad deal. I mean, I just did a bad job.
Mm-hmm.
I was making more money than I ever made in my life. Was very comfortable in the military. I felt it was the first place I ever fit in. It was an adventure. I enjoyed being in the military. I didn't enjoy fighting a war, but I enjoyed the military. I enjoyed the spirit. I enjoyed the adventure. I got to see things that I never would have seen. Got my eyes open. It's a big world out there. And I didn't have a job waiting on me when I got back here. I wasn't married, didn't have any family, no kids. No real strings tied to me. I said, well, I might as well go back. So I extended for 6 months. And that set me up to go back with them. That gave me a minimum amount of time I needed to go back. So that was, I had to extend for 7 months, which then gave me the minimum amount of time because I had to have 6 months in country. From the time that they started their move, which, I was one of the last ones from the division, the aviation battalion was one of the last bunch to go, so I didn't leave till December 7th. I'd go back to Vietnam. So it was, anyhow, so I made the decision I was going to not re-enlist. I thought I was planning on re-enlisting, okay? I had plans to re-enlist and stay in the military. But I decided that I with this variable re-enlistment bonus thing they had, I thought if I get one more grade, because it was your base pay times your variable re-up thing by what job you had. Obviously, more skilled your job or more critical your job, the higher your thing was, times the number of years. So if you re-enlisted for 6 years, and I was in a pretty good VRB multiplier, I would have gotten the maximum amount of money if I could get one more grade promotion. And I said, good chance of it. So I extended for 6 months. Well, or 7 months. And then as a reward, the first sergeant, for being a nice guy, the first sergeant gets another call one Saturday afternoon, Labor Day weekend. Nobody's at Fort Campbell. Says, you want to be a crew chief on a helicopter? Sure. Pack up your A-bag, and no weapon this time. I get my A-bag packed up, all my go-to-war stuff. They call it an EWO kit now, Emergency War Order Kit. And said, you're going to Mexico. I said, Mexico? What's going on down there? We fighting a war or something? No, floods. In September 67, they had bad floods in Acapulco. Mm-hmm. So I went to Acapulco. Well, I didn't make it to Acapulco right then. They changed. They issued a sidearms, and then they changed. Because there's a treaty that goes clear back to Santa Ana and the Alamo with Mexico, that or Pancho Villa or whenever, that no U.S. government troops could be on. They took us to the PX, bought us blue jeans and cowboy shirts. We couldn't wear anything that said U.S. Army on it. We had to paint the U.S. Army out of our helicopters. Just took and slapped some OD paint over it, because just to meet the criteria of this thing, even though they asked us for help, we still had to paint over our insignia on our helicopters and paint over the U.S. Army. We took and loaded on C-133s, big cargo planes. Took the rotors off, and you pull the mast out and the tail rotor off, and you slide the helicopter right inside, and the rotor blades alongside of it, and you can get two on a big cargo plane. So we went out, we got down to Mexico, or to Acapulco, early in the morning. And we put the airplanes together, the helicopters together. We took 4 helicopters. We were now flying relief missions. We were flying food, mostly. And we had a tent set up on Acapulco International Airport. Nasty place. Place where we was set up, clear back or on the other side, away from everything. Backside this airport. We're eating sea rations out of a can. And that evening, or that afternoon late, one of our crews is flying along, and by stroke of luck, one of the Mexican truck drivers backed a truck into one of the doors on the helicopter. Mm-hmm. So I said, it's warm down here, pull the doors off. Mm-hmm. So we flew with the doors off. And the crew chief, sitting there looking out, flying over this water. And just tops of trees and tops of buildings sticking out. And it's one clump of trees. He's sitting there looking backwards because, kind of keep the wind blast from blowing in his face. Had his head turned. He's got a flight helmet and a visor down. He's sitting there looking backwards. And as he looked back, underneath some trees, he seen something caught his eye. Well, he hit the hot mic and called the pilot on the intercom, and they made a circle around. They found out that there was trees growing over the top of this building. There's a whole family on top of it.
On top of the building.
On top of this building. And they had been there, and they was about dead. Mm-hmm. I mean, they'd been there 5 or 6 days. No food. and they was in bad shape. There was about 10 of them up there. Well, they called in one of the big air sea rescue helicopters and winched them out from the Mexican Air Force. And we land there, and this guy comes up and looks like a white suit. And we're down there at the airport, sitting around there, everybody talking about how we made this big save. And this guy pulls up in his limo, white suit, and says, "Oh, you saved my family. You saved my family." So this was, and he says, "There's 21 of us from our unit down there." He says, "You got to come to my place for dinner." Oh, it beats the hell out of eating out of cans. Well, he said, "Where you stay? Where you stay?" And we said, "Over in that tent on them cots." "Oh, can't do that. Just come to my place. Come to my place." Give us a card, Presidente Hotel. It's where they got the cliff divers. Man, this it's like terraced into the side of a mountain. Little, like little motel units. 4 or 5 rooms, and it had its own driveway, and it was a fantastic place. So we get over there, and anything you want. It's on the house. Stay here. So we stayed in one of the finest hotels in Acapulco. Each room had one of these little Jeeps, these little pink Jeeps that had the striped roof and the gold fringe around it. And we run around in Mexico, or in Acapulco. We'd fly all day. And as soon as it started getting dark, we'd shut them down for the night, pull our maintenance, and we go back in our room. The guys say, room service, whatever you want. I can send up anything. Girls, booze, whatever you want. Just say, we'll send it. Your clothes that you took off the day before was all pressed and neatly folded. Your bed was made, everything. I mean, it was just done up right. 21 of us. Mm-hmm. We stayed down there for 10 days. Mm-hmm. Finally, we flew back. The guy didn't charge us a dime. Said, you saved my whole family. And I can imagine what that hotel bill would have been for 21 of us. Our meals and all. The guys were sending up bottles and driving those Jeeps all over the place. Oh my God! It was something. It would have been about like the national debt, that motel bill. Then we come back. And they said, "Well, how'd you guys?" "Oh, we had it so bad, and we couldn't do this, and we stayed in the tent, and it was terrible. We never stayed in the tent." They paid us per diem, which was then $16 a day. They paid us the per diem for staying
there.
Oh yeah, because we had to eat on the local economy and stuff. It was terrible. They said, "Oh, we don't want to hear about this." Plus, we got to keep the blue jeans and the cowboy shirts. So. Anyhow, then the rest of the time, after we returned, it kind of was practice for war.
Yeah.
And
are you about the only one that's been to Vietnam?
There was a few, but mostly I'm about it.
Most of them were regulars that were going back.
Right. Well, no, they hadn't been there. Most of them were young troops.
Yeah, but the ones that had been there were regulars that were going for a second.
Most of and our unit B company of 101st Aviation Battalion had the gunships. We was called the support company. Okay. A company was the slicks and lifts. We were the support company. We had the gunships and we cut. We did that. It was a situation where it was just a unique thing. We had 6 gunships, a U-6 Beaver, a fixed-wing airplane, 2 command and control helicopters for division commander, assistant division commander, and 2 Loaches we used for scouting. 086 we got over in Vietnam.
What division are we going with?
101st Airborne Division.
101st Airborne.
Yeah, Screaming Eagles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we quit for today and take up next week?
Okay.
Well, we're see, today is November
6th.
1985, and if my memory serves me right, we were getting ready. At our last session, we were getting ready to leave Fort Knox and go back to Fort Campbell, and go with which group? And
101st Airborne.
Okay.
Okay, I was in B Company Aviation Battalion. And, before we left for Vietnam, October of 67, I'd come back from Mexico in September. October, I went to aerial gunnery school at Fort Benning, Georgia. And an interesting situation happened down there while we was down there firing. We didn't take our helicopters. We took and used from a training unit at Benning. And we went in, we fired their helicopters and fired weaponry off their helicopters and fired our guns and stuff. And we fired the door guns and learned how to tactics of using the employment of weapons. And while we was there, John Wayne and David Jansen was there filming the Green Berets. And our helicopters are on the film for the Green Berets firing the weapons. They filmed our helicopters while we was down at gunnery school firing, and that's the film that's when they attacked the bridge and they fired the helicopters, the gunships. That was our I was on the helicopter firing, which was kind of an interesting thing. Got to see everybody. It was quite a hoopla around Fort Benning then. It was really something with all the movie stars in. But that's where that was filmed, and they did and all the Vietnam scenes were filmed at Fort Benning, which was kind of neat because Lawson Field, where I had taken off when I made my parachute jumps, I was down there for jump school. The last part of the film of the Green Berets, when John Wayne's got the little boy, and you can see the airborne chapel up on the hill there. They're at Lawson Field, and he turns around, and there's the Pacific Ocean. I always thought that was great. What happens if you really turn around in that spot's the Chattahoochee River. It's not not the Pacific Ocean. But yeah, I was down there and they filmed the Green Berets while I was down there. And of course the filming went on after we left. They come back, and at the end of October of 67, and just started packing. Basically, we packed everything up. We trained, went out and flew a lot of night missions, and took our helicopters apart and got everything ready to marshal and load. And December 7th, I left for Vietnam.
65.
No, 67.
67, okay.
December 7th, 67. Because I remember this was Pearl Harbor Day. I said, oh boy, what a day to leave to go to war. And it was the largest, up to that time, it was the largest airlift to a combat zone ever attempted. The entire division was flown over. We flew over in C-141s. It was pretty neat because there was I had a truck and a Jeep, and there was about 5 people on the thing. We went over with some cargo, and we got to spend most of our time sitting up in the cockpit, watching in the jump seat up there beside the navigator. And I took off out of Campbell about 10 o'clock at night, flying northwest to Anchorage, Alaska, to Elmendorf Air Force Base, where our first stop was. And we got a briefing there at DACO. DACO is DACO. It's Departing Airfield Control Officer. You have a DACO briefing when you made a parachute jump too. But anyhow, they says you'll leave here and you'll go to board a C-141, and they give you a briefing on the emergency procedures for the C-141. And you're going to go from here to Elmendorf, and you'll have a 6-hour layover at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, and you'll go on to Yokota. Well, they called it Techikawa West then. It was Yokota Air Force Base now. To Yokota, or Techikawa Air Force Base in Japan, and you'll have a 8-hour layover there. And then you'll go on into Benoit, Vietnam, and you'll have a very long layover there. You'll have the longest layover of the trip at Benoit. So that was the first time we knew exactly where we was going. Anyhow, I got into Benoit, and they sent a bus over and picked us up and brought us over to Camp Green. which was on the north edge of the air base. The runway run east-west, almost directly through the middle. And the Air Force was on one side and we was on the other. And there's kind of up a little hill. And we went into Camp Green. And this is December. So we're going to spend